The first thing I am aware of is cold. A cold that has nothing to do with weather and everything to do with the fact that the body it presses against is no longer breathing the way a body should. Somewhere, very far above me, a man is shouting in a voice that keeps cracking apart, and a small girl is wailing, and the wet sound of a palm pressing down again and again on a child's chest is keeping rhythm with both of them. I drift inside that darkness for what feels like a long time, and then a different memory begins to push itself up through the dark. My own memory from a place that is not this place. I had been crossing a road on my way to register at Jinling University. The semi-trailer had come around the corner faster than anything that heavy ought to be able to move, and the last thing I saw was the front grille and a flash of orange paint. So, am I dead? I think the question dryly, almost without surprise. The truck had hit me at near 80 kilometers an hour. There was no honest way to walk away from that. I think about the small life I had built, and how easily it can be summed up. I had been an orphan, taken in by a couple who were kind to me until they conceived a son of their own. And after that, I became an extra mouth at their table. Never beaten, never cast out, only quietly subtracted from the family arithmetic. I did not hate them. They had not abandoned me a second time. They had fed me. They had paid for school. So I had repaid them by working. I had been first in my class from primary school onward, and I had taken the third highest score in the county on the liberal arts entrance exam, and I had been admitted to Jinling University. And on the way to that very admission, a runaway truck had taken everything I had built. I feel regret. I feel, also, a thin sliver of relief. There had been no one in the world for whom my leaving would mean anything more than a chair empty at a holiday table. I had never possessed enough to lose. While I am making my peace with all this, a voice begins to call to me through the dark. Several voices familiar and strange at the same time, tugging at a heartstring I am sure I do not have. A buzzing fades from my ears. I hear a man cry out for Galon. My child, wake up quickly. I hear a small girl scream that her brother does not want her anymore. I feel hands shaking me, hands pressing on my chest, the burning bloated weight of salt water inside my throat and lungs. I try to make a sound and instead vomit a great surge of seawater out onto the rocks, and the world comes back into me through that single retch. Light noise, the weight of a wool cloak, the smell of brine and wet stone. I open my eyes. I see men in black and gray wool, men with western faces and long hair, kneeling around me with anxiety and joy, fighting each other across their faces. I see beaches and reefs, and the long withdrawing tongue of a tide that very nearly swallowed me whole. A lord in a heavy cloak pulls me into his arms and tears fall instantly onto my hair. A small blonde girl, no more than 4, throws herself at my arm and sobs without any pride at all into the wet wool of my sleeve. And then, like a tide of its own, a second set of memories floods up out of somewhere deeper than my own thoughts and lays itself down inside me. The memories of a boy named Galon Tarth, eldest son of House Tarth of Evenstar Hall on the island of Tarth, 8 years old, who had heard a fisher boy speak of a faint cyan and orange shimmer in a sea cave at Mourn's Point, and who had been reckless and proud enough to dive into rising water in pursuit of a legendary sword. I have transmigrated. The realization lands quietly, with very little of the noise I would have imagined a thing like this should make. Westeros, the Stormlands, House Tarth. This is the world of Game of Thrones. The series I had loved most on Earth, the one I had read in its book form after finishing the show, the one with dragons and Essos and Ashai and the unknown lands beyond. And the small blonde girl clutching my arm, with her freckles and her sturdy little body and her sapphire eyes, is Brienne the Beauty, the only female knight in the Seven Kingdoms. The girl who, on the page, would mention only ever once that her older brother, 4 years older than her, had drowned when she was 4. That brother was Galon Tarth. That brother is me. I should be in shock. Instead, what I feel is something close to relief. On Earth I had been almost no one to almost no one. Here I am, the heir to an island, the son of an earl, the elder brother of a girl whose character was among the most upright in the entire show. The body settles around me. The new memories knit themselves into the old, and the old begin to feel more like a thing I once dreamed than a place I once lived. I can recall everything Galon recalled from the moment he first knew himself in this world. I am 8 years old and I am alive, and my father is crushing the breath out of me with the fierceness of his relief. Father, I manage. I'm fine. I pat his back as best I can with arms that still feel half made of seawater, and Earl Selwyn finally pulls back enough to look at me. His usual mask of composed Stormlander wisdom has fallen completely off his face. There is only the wild-eyed joy of a man who had been preparing himself, in the space of a single hourglass, to bury a second son. He feels the chill in my body and tears off his black velvet cloak and bundles me inside it, and he says, "Come, we are going back to the castle." He means to take me to Maester Armon at once. "Wait, father," I say. They look at me, all of them. The steward Claude with his receding hair and his anxious balding pate. The knights and guards in their boiled leather. My little sister with her tear-streaked freckled face. Without explanation, I step toward the reef where the tide had spat me up, and I begin to feel through the seawater and gravel for what I half remembered carrying ashore. There, a faint clear shimmer deep beneath the water. I close my hand around it. I lift it. Everyone freezes and holds their breath at once. The blade in my hand is not a thing of mortal forging. The whole length of it gives off a soft cyan light, like the breath of the deep sea drawn upward into steel. The light is not dazzling, it is gentle. It ripples like the surface of the Bay of Tarth on a moonlit night, and along both edges of the blade run two thin orange-red lines, exactly like that sliver of horizon just before the sun rises out of the sea. The crossguard and the hilt are made of a gray-white material as warm as ivory and as cold hard as metal, and at the pommel, an oval blue-black gemstone is set, ringed by a band of tiny inscriptions. The whole sword in my 8-year-old hand weighs nothing at all. It feels like morning light, and though I am holding it for the first time in this body, every man on that beach already knows its name. The name speaks itself in their ears as if a low whisper had been laid into all of them at once. Oathkeeper, a holy sword, one of the knights breathes. The sword of morning light. Oathkeeper, the young lord found it. One after another, the men in their boiled leather drop to one knee, their long swords thudding against the wet stone, and they look at me with the kind of feverish devotion that is dangerous to wear easily. Brienne, still streaked with tears, points at the sword in my hand and gabbles excitedly to our father. Father, brother, Oathkeeper. Earl Selwyn's mouth hangs open. Steward Claude meets his lord's eye, and his shock turns slowly into a wild joy he cannot find words for. And, while they all stare at the sword I am holding, something else has happened that none of them can see. A panel has appeared in my line of sight, written in translucent blue script, a thing that hangs in the air directly in front of my eyes the way a window might hang on a wall. Galon Tarth. Title, None. Strength 3.12. Agility 4.1. Spirit 12.8. Magic blank. Skills and percentages: swordsmanship at 3, archery at 7, riding at 4, the common tongue of Westeros at 27, swimming at 29. Legendary bloodlines, 3 of them: blood of the Evenstar at 3% development, Targaryen bloodline at 0, Storm King bloodline at 0, Storm King bloodline at 0. Legendary weapon, Oathkeeper, gold tier quality at maximum, cannot be upgraded. Legendary pet, none. Judgment points 0. Beside several of these lines is a small gray plus sign, and at the bottom is that. One strange word, judgment, with a number after it, and the number is empty. So this is my golden finger. I call out for a system in my mind, the way 1,000 transmigrator novels had taught me you were supposed to, and there is no answering voice. Whatever this panel is, it has no intelligence to converse with. The pluses are gray, which means I cannot click them yet. The judgment points line sits there with its empty number. So, in order to add to any of these attributes, I must first acquire judgment points. How exactly does one acquire judgment points? The panel does not say. I feel the small headache that any transmigrator would feel at being given a manual without instructions, and I cannot help wondering whether this golden finger of mine is a gift of my crossing over, or whether it has been pulled out of the sea, along with this sword. Legendary weapon, Oathkeeper, gold. The only thing on the panel whose quality is already at the very top. The blade in my hand catches my attention again. I bend my eye to the inscriptions at the pommel, and the small ring of letters resolves itself for me alone. Just made. Oathkeeper. The legendary holy sword that the Maiden of the Seven in the Legends of the Seven-Pointed Star had bestowed upon Galon of Mourn in the Age of Heroes. The sword is real. The sword is mine. I cannot quite hide my excitement. In Westeros, what knight does not dream of carrying a named ancestral blade? The oldest houses pride themselves on a single piece of Valyrian steel, and now, 8 years old and still wet with seawater, I am holding a sword that surpasses Valyrian steel, as morning light surpasses lamplight. I lift it experimentally. It cuts the air with no resistance at all, and its weight perfectly suits the small body I have inherited, as if it has measured me and adjusted itself. And to settle the matter completely, on the backswing I clip the protruding corner of a reef beside me, and a chunk of stone the size of my head slides cleanly off into the water. The cut is smooth as a mirror. Even cutting through iron like butter would not begin to describe it. Father, is this? Earl Selwyn's voice has gone trembling and raspy. Oathkeeper. He had named me Galon to bless me with the name of the legendary hero, never imagining that his eldest son would actually find the holy sword that had been lost since the Dawn Age. He reaches out a trembling hand to touch the blade, and the moment his fingertip brushes the steel, he yanks it back with a hiss as if struck by lightning. A bright red burn has appeared on his fingertip, with a faint thread of smoke curling upward from it. The holy sword chooses its master. My lord, Claude says quietly. There is no displeasure on my father's face. There is only joy brighter than before. He commands the steward to try, and Claude, jaw set, reaches out and is also burned. The two of them look at one another. He commands every knight and guard to try as well, and one by one swallowing, they reach out and one by one they recoil with cries of pain and burns that will become small permanent honors on their hands. Not one of them looks angry. Every one of them looks reverent. They never expected, in any life of theirs, that their young masters tumble into the sea would mean they had been present when Tarth's lost holy sword came back into the world. I plant Oathkeeper into the sand and pull it free again, and the men climb back onto their feet, and Earl Selwyn at last lets the smile he has been holding back blossom out into something close to wonder. Come, he says, back to the castle. The guards roar their assent. He takes a leather sheath from one of the men and wraps the sword in it, and he scoops me up onto his horse with him. And Steward Claude takes Brienne, and the whole company turns its back on the rising tide and rides for Evenfall Hall. Evenfall Hall sits on a hill on the western coast of Tarth, looking across the Bay of Tarth towards Storm's End on the opposite shore of the strait. The castle is built of weathered grey stone, walls thick and rugged with sea weather, and at its center rises the tall Duskstar Tower with the family banner of yellow sun and blue moon, mottled green with sea rust, marking 1,000 years of patient holding. By the time we ride into the courtyard, old Maester Armin is already waiting, gowned in grey, his chain heavy across his chest. Fires lit, hot soup made ready, he reports the moment my father dismounts. He does not yet know about the sword. He cannot understand why every face in the company is lit not with the grey of grief, but with a fervor none of them is bothering to hide. Inside the great hall, by the fire, Claude and Maester Armand strip my wet clothes off me and bundle me into a thick wool blanket and set me in front of the hearth. Claude's breath catches a little when he sees me set Oathkeeper carefully aside on the flagstones. Maester Armand eyes the strange beautiful longsword and decides kindly to ask later. He puts a bowl of meatball soup with cinnamon dates and mint into my hands and makes me sip it slowly. Brienne keeps adding small handfuls of kindling to the fire because in her 4-year-old mind, a brighter fire will mend her brother faster. I cannot help reaching out and pulling her into my arms. She is not the cold, distant brother of my last life. This one burrows trustingly inside the wool blanket until only her freckled nose and her 2 bright sapphire eyes peek out at me from the fold. The closeness of it cracks something open in me that I had thought was shut for good. Earl Selwyn watches us across the hearth, and a slow, deep smile of relief works itself across his face. Then his eye falls on Oathkeeper and he steels himself, and he reaches for it. This time he has learned. He grasps only the leather sheath. Even so, the weight surprises him, 30 or 40 pounds at least, twice the weight of an ordinary 2-handed sword, and he must use both hands to hold it level. Yet at Mourn's point I had swung the same blade easily one-handed. The sword adjusts its weight for its master and turns leaden in any other hand. He examines the inscriptions at the pommel. Just made, Oathkeeper. He sets the blade down very carefully and exhales. He stares for a long while at the family banner above the hearth. 2 suns on a red field and 2 moons on a blue, the sigil of House Tarth. House Stark has been glorious. House Baratheon has been glorious. House Lannister, House Gardner, even the upjumped Tyrells of Highgarden, all of them have been glorious. But House Tarth has not left a real mark on the history of Westeros for a very long time. The head of House Tarth had once been honored with the title Evenstar. No one calls them that any longer. The end of dusk, my father whispers under his breath, the family motto coming to him unbidden, the coming of dawn. He looks across the hearth at me cradling Brienne, and he allows himself for the first time to think that perhaps Galon is the dawn of House Tarth. When the fire has settled, and Brienne has dozed off against my chest, my father turns his head toward me again. Galon, he says, and his voice has a careful edge. Why did you jump into the sea and into that cave without thinking? Was it Old Feck's son who led you? I understand at once what he is really asking. No, father, I tell him, shaking my head. Old Feck's son did nothing. You don't need to trouble him. In the borrowed memories, the fisher boy had begged the old Galon not to go in. Earl Selwyn's eye holds mine for a moment longer, weighing whether some scheme might have been at work against the heir of House Tarth. But in the end, he believes me. Then why were you so certain the holy sword was in the cave? He asks. I think for a moment and tell him a small useful lie. I heard a kind of call from the shore. A call from the holy sword. His eyes widen, his chest heaves, and I nod gravely. After all, I do not know yet how strangely I shall behave in the days ahead, and there is no harm in laying down, this early, the suggestion that the sword speaks to me in ways no other man can understand. Earl Selwyn fills in the rest of the picture for himself, that his son might be marked for some great responsibility, that his son might be a man favored by the Seven. The conviction settles on him the way snow settles on a roof, by its own slow weight. He will not tell me, but I see in the rapid breath behind his composure that he has taken on, in a single afternoon, a hope so heavy it has begun to frighten him. I do not feel any of that weight. I am quietly teasing my sister, who has begun to drowse, pinching one of her plump warm hands with my thumb and forefinger. 4-year-old Brienne is sturdy and warm and thoroughly cute. There is no hint yet of the nearly 2-meter warrior she will become a decade later. No awkward growth, no crooked teeth. Her sapphire eyes are exactly as the books described them. The freckles are exactly where the books said they would be. I find that I am very fond of this little sister already. I think how, in the original story, she was called ugly mostly because of her height and her crooked teeth and her broad-built strength, and not because the bones of her face are bad, and I begin to think that, given a little quiet attention, this small girl could grow into a tall woman of great strength who is also unmistakably handsome. Skincare, a way to keep her teeth straight, the right balance of exercise. I file the notes away. I have time. I have nothing but time. I reopen the panel in my mind and read it through again, slowly, while my sister sleeps against my chest. Strength 3.12, agility 4.1. Those numbers, I guess, mean that adult average is somewhere near 10. Spirit 12.8, that is too high for an 8-year-old, and the only honest explanation is the soul of a transmigrator stacked on top of a child's accumulated memories. The skill percentages match what I find in Galon's memories, writing in archery and swordsmanship that are real but only beginning. The common tongue at 27% because he is still only 8 years into reading and writing it. Swimming at 29 because he was born on an island and grew up in the sea. I assume 100% means full mastery for an ordinary man. Then the bloodlines. And these are the things I had not expected. 3 legendary bloodlines, all of which the panel declares undeveloped or near to it. Blood of the Evenstar runs in House Tarth back to the Dawn Age, and it must be the reason Brienne, in the books, grows as tall and as strong as she does. Perhaps a sliver of Evenstar awakening in her body. The Storm King bloodline traces to House Durrandon, the Storm Kings of old, who held Storm's End before House Targaryen's coming. House Tarth and House Durrandon intermarried for centuries, and the trait shows even now in our hair. The men of House Tarth, like the men of House Baratheon afterward, carry the thick black hair of the Storm Kings, while Brienne, like an Evenstar daughter, carries the pale gold of her mother's people. That is the pair I might have expected. The third, the Targaryen bloodline, is the surprise. House Baratheon, ruling the Stormlands these 2 centuries, had married into House Tarth quite often, and House Baratheon's own veins carry the blood of old Valyria diluted but real. Through those Baratheon-Tarth marriages, a thread of Targaryen has been woven into me, almost too thin to call mine. For most of House Tarth, this thread is meaningless. For me, it means I can put points into it. That bloodline matters more than I want to admit to myself. To allocate enough points to wake the Targaryen blood in me would mean, in time, the gift of fire immunity, the answering call of dragons. Dragons are not optional in this world. Having a dragon and not having a dragon are 2 utterly different things, so that is the one I will be hungriest to feed. Not now. Now I do not even know how to earn judgment points. But one day, the steward's voice breaks across my study of the panel. "Young master, the bath is ready. Please come up to your room and rest." Claude has appeared at my elbow with a soft smile and a faint flush across his bald head from the firelight. I look down and realize that even though I am dry now, the salt is still gritty across my skin. I gently lift Brienne onto my father's lap, and Earl Selwyn settles her against him with a gentle, weary affection. "Go on," he says. "Get some good rest." I follow Claude up the spiral granite stairs of the Dusk Star Tower, the iron oil lamps in the wall throwing long flickering shadows onto the stone. The muffled sound of the sea coming up through a high small window. My bedroom is on the 5th floor, a heavy oak door carved with a yellow sun and blue moon. Inside, a faded tapestry of Galon of Mornay hand in hand with the Maiden of the Seven, a thick wool rug, a wooden tub already steaming with hot water, lavender petals and herbs floating on the surface, a fire in the hearth, and a small adjoining door slightly ajar that opens into the maid's narrow alcove. A girl of 13 or 14 with chestnut hair tied in a ponytail rises from the tub side and curtsies. Galena, the maid my late mother had personally chosen for me, has served me since I was small enough to need her to dress me. She helps me out of my salt-stiff clothes with the easy skill of long habit, and I sink into the warm water and the smell of rosemary, and feel my body give up the last of its tension. I tell her she may go for now. She bows away into her alcove. I lean my head back against the rim of the wooden tub and close my eyes and think. I have arrived too early. By Maester Armin's reckoning, the year is 275 after the conquest. The Mad King Aerys still sits the Iron Throne. Ned Stark is 12, only 4 years older than me. The tourney at Harrenhal is more than a decade away. The War of the Usurper later. I am, for the moment, in the same generation as Jaime Lannister and Ned Stark and Petyr Baelish. All of them still children. Interesting, I think, with my eyes closed, and the corner of my mouth lifts in a small smile. By the time the real plot begins, I shall be around 30, in the prime of my strength, and I shall have spent 20 years getting ready. I am the heir to Evenfall Hall, and the legitimate son of a lord. Tarth is not the wealthiest fief on the eastern coast. That title still belongs to the Arbor, but it has a population near 150,000, 3 towns and 20 or 30 villages, mountains and grasslands and forests, a fleet of more than a dozen trading ships that can be turned to war. With one word, my father can muster 20 knights and 3,000 soldiers. Tarth lies northeast of Storm's End, the natural shield of House Baratheon. It is the closest island in Westeros to the continent of Essos. 5 days' sail to Pentos, 3 to Tyrosh, faster than the run to King's Landing. A truly excellent place to start. I find I cannot find a fault with it. With the knowledge of a transmigrator, with 20 years of patient work, with a brother who is heir and a sister who is Brienne, with 3 bloodlines and a holy sword and a panel that promises growth in exchange for judgment, I might do a great deal. When the War of the Usurper comes, House Tarth could fairly take its share of the spoils for backing Robert. I find myself, soaking in the steam, beginning to plan. Galena's voice reaches me through the alcove door. Would I like more hot water? I rise from the tub instead, water sliding off me, and tell her I am finished. She drapes a soft warm towel around me and dries me as she has always dried me. I am 8, and have not yet developed, and to refuse her now would be the strange thing. She hands me underclothes and a black silk sleeping robe. She rings a small bell, and a few sturdy serving women come and carry the tub and its cooling water out of the room. Galena tidies the bed once more and bows herself away. I am not ready to sleep yet. The afternoon light is still bright, and I push the window open onto the deep blue sea and the pale blue line of the horizon. And I look down at Sapphire Port, where the merchants are docking and the fishing boats are coming home, and at Sapphire Town's red roofs beyond, and at the green of distant pasture above the cliffs. The walls of Evenfall Hall are 20 feet high, built of gray granite 10 feet thick at the base, crowned by a low crenellated parapet with iron arrow slits, and at the southeast a half-collapsed watchtower leans against the curtain wall, its ruin overgrown with stubborn green sea rocket. Duskstar Tower itself stands 100 feet tall, a beacon in fog for the merchant ships passing through the strait. Other towers, kitchens, armory, storerooms, flank it under weathered bluish-black tiles, white smoke rising from two of their square chimneys. The courtyard below is paved with gravel and crushed seashells, neat as a swept hearth, nothing at all like the muddy yards of Winterfell I remember from television. Behind the castle, the boughs of ancient trees mark the Godswood, where the boy I was used to play. 1,000 years of careful Tarth holding has built a castle that is both beautiful and stubborn. Whatever I had imagined of medieval life, this is better. Eventually, I close the window and climb into bed, and to my surprise, I sleep more soundly than I had ever slept on Earth. Perhaps 3 legendary bloodlines come with the gift of healthy rest. In the morning, I wake feeling rested in a way I do not remember ever feeling. Angelina calls a cheerful good morning from her alcove and brings me hot water and toiletries. The toothbrush in the cup is, of course, only a chewed twig the length of a chopstick, the upper third frayed into rough bristles. I dip it in salt as the previous Galon used to do, and clean my teeth as best I can, and my gums sting and bleed a little for the trouble. I shall need to invent a proper toothbrush. I shall need to invent a great many small things. The thought makes me smile. Galena dresses me, a close-fitting linen shirt, a dark gray wool and silk robe embroidered with antique gold thread patterns, and fastened with 3 ebony buttons, plain black linen trousers tied below the knee with leather cords, a pair of high cowhide boots for the rocky island ground, and around my waist a tanned cowhide belt with a gold buckle and a wave-carved tail. The whole outfit marks me a noble at a glance. A commoner could not afford it after a year of work. In my last life, I had owned 1 or 2 sets of clothes, replaced only when worn through, and I had refused every confession a girl made to me in school because I had been ashamed of how I dress here. I stand before the half-length brass mirror in the south corner of the bedroom and look at the boy I have become. Short, dark, slightly curly hair with messy ends, the black hair of the Storm Kings, the same black as my father's. A pair of clear blue eyes ringed faintly with light gray near the pupil, like a sea shrouded in morning mist. Pale skin with a few freckles scattered on either side of the nose. Long, slender brows, a straight nose, a chin that is firm but not yet hard, nearly 5 feet tall already, far above what 8-year-olds should manage. I look at the boy in the brass and I cannot help thinking, with a small private smile, that this is a face that suits the master of Oathkeeper. I leave the bedroom and go down the spiral stair to the great hall, where the maids are already laying out breakfast. "The young master," they cry, and they bow with a brightness in their eye that they did not used to have when I came down. The news of the Holy Sword has plainly already gone through the household. Steward Claude tells me my father rode to Sapphire Town the previous night and has not yet returned, and Brienne is still asleep. I sit at my usual place. Breakfast is a feast. 3 kinds of bread, 4 kinds of meat, 2 soups, apples and blood oranges, and pumpkin chunks roasted to take the edge off the richness. The cooking is plain by my old standards, but the ingredients are excellent. I eat and enjoy. And then, instead of waiting for my sister to wake, I climb to the 3rd floor of the adjacent tower, where Maester Armand makes his lessons among his ravens. Maester Armand greets me with sparkling eyes. He had been the one Earl Selwyn told of the Holy Sword the night before, and he had not slept much for the excitement of it. The chain across his gray robes is heavier than most maesters' chains. Bronze for astronomy, black iron for history, silver for medicine, gold for arithmetic, a rare platinum link for mastery of Valerian and ancient texts, and a small copper at the end for navigation and cartography. He has served House Tarth for 30 years. He is 60 now, his hair streaked with gray, but his eye has not lost its sharpness. He tells me kindly that I should rest after yesterday's drowning. I shake my head. I tell him that knowledge matters as much as steel. He is delighted. Few noble children, especially boys, choose study over riding and hunting. To find that the new bearer of the Holy Sword has chosen to study is, for him, a small private joy. He tests me on heraldry first. "House Royce of the Vale," he asks. I recall in 2 seconds. Runestone north of Gulltown along the narrow sea. Sigil of pebbles between 2 rows of runes on an orange field. Words we remember. And without his asking, I add the rest. That the Royces are one of the few houses of the Vale to descend from the first men. That their kings of the Bronze Age held the title Bronze Kings. That they once carried the Valyrian steel sword Lament until it was lost in the Dance of the Dragons. That they yet possess ancestral bronze armors inscribed with old runes, said to ward the wearer. I remember things now, I notice as I speak, with a clarity that the boy I was on Earth never had. Memory has thickened into something dependable. Maester Armin's admiration is plain. He asks for House Valerian, and I give him Driftmark and the silver seahorse on a sea-green field, and the words, the old, the true, the brave, and tell him that the Valerines came to Driftmark before the Targaryens came to Dragonstone, that they share Valyrian features, though they are not a Dragonlord house, that the office of Master of Ships on the small council usually goes to their head. He stops me there. Galon, he says, you have mastered heraldry. We shall begin a new lesson. He writes 3 options on a piece of parchment and slides it to me. Geography and cartography of the 7 kingdoms. Noble etiquette and laws of succession. Medicine and herbal knowledge. I think for a moment and choose geography. Etiquette and laws can wait. Medicine I need only in passing, but a transmigrator without a map is a transmigrator wasting his good fortune. Then I add a request. May I take a second course as well? Of course, he says. Which? Valyrian, I answer. The maester's brow lifts. Valyrian is taught chiefly to children of House Targaryen and House Valerion. To Westerosi nobles outside that circle it is almost useless, since only the free cities use it. I give him the smaller of my 2 reasons, that I hear merchants from the free cities speaking it at Sapphire port and am curious about Essos, and hope to travel there one day. The truer reason, that one cannot ride a dragon by speaking only the common tongue I keep to myself. Travel to the free cities. The maester nods. That is no bad ambition for a young heir. He has spent his 30 years on Tarth meeting merchants from Essos and even from the Summer Isles, and he believes a journey would broaden me. Very well, he says. Then I shall teach you both. The lessons will be condensed. You will need to spend more time studying. He unrolls a great map on the long table, and we begin with Westeros, and I pick it up almost as fast as he can lay it down, because I have spent hours of my last life staring at electronic maps of these very lands. He smiles at the speed of it. Then he takes down a slim volume of Valyrian poetry and begins to teach me Valyrian script and pronunciation by way of verse. Not the textbook a sane teacher would have chosen, but in a world without dictionaries one teaches what one has. And I grit my teeth and listen. After 2 incense sticks of Valyrian I check my panel quietly. The skill bar does not yet show Valyrian. Below 1% the panel does not list a language at all, I gather. Not a problem. I have no judgment points to spend, and no idea yet how to earn them. And Valyrian will come. A maid knocks. My lord is back in the hall and asks for us. I bow to Maester Armin, and he tells me with a smile that today's lesson ends here, and I follow the maid down to the great hall, where my father is waiting with a sword in his hand. From the hilt I know it for Oathkeeper, but the crude leather wrap of yesterday is gone. In its place is a splendid black scabbard, freshly forged. So that is where my father went the night before. To Byron, the most skilled blacksmith on Tarth, in Sapphire Town, to have a scabbard hammered through the night. The faint redness in my father's eyes tells me he has not slept. Galon, the scabbard is ready, he says, and offers the sword to me with both hands. I take it one-handed and examine it. Black iron, hammered rough on the surface for a sturdy feel, lined in pine wood that is light and shows its honey gold grain along the seam, a band of gray sharkskin near the throat for grip, fine threads of silver tracing across the iron and around the wood for a cold gleaming line, about 4 feet from sheath mouth to point. Most strangely, the leather clasp has been set up not for the hip, but for the back. My father has thought ahead. The diagonal shoulder rig will fit a small body better than a hip belt would. I am 8 and not quite the height for a 4-foot sword on the hip. On the back, in another year or 2, I shall wear it perfectly. I draw it a few inches. The clear, cool light of the blade flares, that soft, pleased metallic note hums, and a third of the breathtaking blade leaves the sheath. Every face in the hall fixes on it and breathes shallower. The sword is so beautiful that simply looking at it can absorb a man's mind. I sheathe it, and I weigh the scabbarded sword in my hand. It is at the very edge of what a child of my size could comfortably carry. I had noticed my father straining when he passed it to me. To me it is light, so Oathkeeper has its own opinion of the proper weight for its master, and adjusts. No wonder the panel calls its quality maxed and unimprovable. Thank you, father, I say, and Earl Selwyn nods at me with the smile of a man who has not yet stopped being grateful that I am alive to thank him. Brienne comes running in then with sand on her hands and her bare feet, and throws herself into my arms. She has been at the beach building little castles. Galon, my father says, watching her. Brienne is 4.5. Tomorrow let her join you in Maester Armin's lessons. I nod. She is sturdier and brighter than girls her age, and the right age for the common tongue. Claude is sent to tell the kitchens to prepare lunch, and as he goes, Maester Armin hurries in clutching a letter still warm from a raven, and tells my father that the queen has born a healthy boy, named by King Aerys Viserys Targaryen. My father chuckles. After a string of miscarriages and stillbirths, the queen has finally born the king a healthy prince, he says. The king's mood will improve a little. I shake my head slightly to myself and say, so it is Viserys, the sleeping dragon. The maester says there is a second letter. Lord Tywin, to celebrate the prince's birth, plans a great tourney at Lannisport 1 month hence. My father reads it and frowns, and says he will not go. He will have Claude arrange a gift to send for the prince's name day. The maester nods and moves to leave, but my father bids him stay and sit and eat. there is something he wishes to discuss. I sit down with my sister on my lap, while my father and the maester between them lay out for one another the political map of Westeros. The open quarrel between King Aerys and his hand Lord Tywin. The small disagreements that have grown into open ones. The upcoming 10th name day of Stannis, the second son of Lord Steffan Baratheon. The dwarf son of Lord Tywin, who has not died as everyone expected, but is growing up at Casterly Rock. I listen. Most of these names are familiar from a life I cannot mention. They are children for the moment. Through their conversation, I begin to understand why the king is called the Mad King, not only for his cruelty but for the strangeness of his ideas. He had once proposed to Lord Rickard Stark of Winterfell that a new wall be built 100 leagues north of the existing one to claim all the land between. And Lord Rickard had stood there speechless, because no one had any idea how a new wall might be constructed. And the area in question was inhabited by 10,000 wildlings, whose displacement would have meant a war. Visiting Sunspear, the king had told the Princess of Dorne that he meant to dig a great underground canal through the Red Mountains, to bring water down from the rainforests, to make the Dornish desert bloom with flowers, and so on. Listening, I almost choke on a piece of bread laughing. Aerys and his second son Viserys, I think, are cut from precisely the same cloth. Viserys' whole talk in the books about waking the dragon must have been learned at his father's knee. I notice the contempt my father is at no pains to hide for the king, and the careful praise he gives Lord Tywin. Whether Tywin is patiently driving the king mad or merely doing competent service in difficult conditions, I cannot tell yet. Either way, his administrative skill, military leadership, and political acumen are the first rank in the Seven Kingdoms. After lunch, Brienne and I go up to nap. Children grow on sleep. When I rise, I sling Oathkeeper across my back and walk down to the Godswood behind the castle. There among the old trees, a tall, brown-haired man in plate armor stands waiting with his back to me, and at the sound of my step he turns, and a sword-scarred face splits into a smile. Sir Goodwin, Master-at-Arms of Evenfall Hall, who placed 6th at the tourney at Highgarden 7 years ago, stern with the soldiers, easier with me. Galon, he says, your father told me you were well, and asked me to continue your lesson today. He looks me over, color, gait, and is satisfied that yesterday's drowning has done me no lasting harm. I make him laugh by answering that any kid on Tarth has gulped down a bit of seawater in his time, and he warns me not to say so where my father can hear. Then his eye finds the sword across my back. Galon, is this the holy sword you found at Mourn's Point? I draw it for him in the long afternoon shadows of the Godswood, and that clear, cool light flares again. His face goes still. Truly extraordinary, he whispers. He is from the Riverlands, near Harrenhal, and he had heard the awe of the others yesterday and held back a small doubt. The doubt is gone. He admits, to me alone, that the sight is more stirring than even Arthur Dane drawing dawn. He says, with a shrug and a small grin, that he will not let me practice with such a sword. A graze from it is more than a scratch. I tell him I have brought it not for sparring but for testing. Yesterday it had taken a corner off a reef without my noticing. I want to know more. Goodwin's eye lights up. What knight does not want to know more about a holy sword? He points me at an old dried stump in the Godswood. 2 men round, cropped off 2 feet from the ground, marked with 100 arrow scars from my own past archery practice. Try cutting that, he says. I take Oathkeeper in both hands and swing once. A sound like a blade through parchment, sharp and almost dry. The upper third of the stump slides off diagonally and thuds onto the moss, throwing dark earth into the air. The cut is mirror smooth. Goodwin walks over, bends, looks closely, and finds himself for a long moment unable to speak. Cutting through a seasoned thick stump with a greatsword is a strenuous chore. The blade should bind 2 or 3 inches deep at best. I have just sliced a third clean off, and the blade had felt to me as if it were cutting stiff cardboard. There had been a moment of resistance, and then the sword had slid through as smoothly as silk. I swing again to be certain. A larger chunk slides off this time. Even cleaner, even less resistance. The thing feels like a small twig under my hands. I cannot quite hide my own delight. It reminds me, ridiculously, of striking at cabbage heads with a stick when I was a boy on Earth. Goodwin watches me swing, breathing harder. Then, without a word, he removes his own plate vest and walks over to the wooden practice dummy I always use, and fits the vest onto the dummy and ties it in place. Try that, he says. Are you sure, sir? I ask. Plate is not cheap. The vest alone is worth 2 gold dragons, and a fisherman on Tarth earns a year of work for 20 or 30 silver stags. He shrugs. To know the truth of a sword, you must test it on real armor. He believes Lord Selwyn will repay the cost. Fair, I say. I set my stance, and grip the hilt with both hands, and I swing with everything my 8-year-old body can put behind it. Sparks, a hard, clean ring, and when the blade halts, I see that the chest of the plate has been slit diagonally, near 3/4 of its length, only barely held together by the lower hem. Beneath, the wood of the dummy carries a deep gash. A man wearing that armor would have been gutted and dead. Goodwin looks like a man who has just glimpsed a future he had not expected. If the 8-year-old can do this, he is plainly thinking, what will the 18-year-old do, and what will that 18-year-old do on a charging warhorse? He shakes himself. Galon, he says, this sword truly lives up to its name as a holy blade. I nod. The 7-pointed star tells me that Galon of Mornay drew Oathkeeper only 3 times in his life. Each time for a foe of unprecedented power, and I am beginning to suspect the sword has more to it than I have yet seen. The faint orange line along its edge, a trace of the magic I have not yet learned to call. I think of the magic line on my panel that sits at 0. Perhaps the deeper power of Oathkeeper draws on magic the wielder must himself supply. The Age of Heroes was a time of magic and monsters, and a hero of that age would have needed more than a sharp blade to earn his name. But Goodwin will not let the lesson become a sermon. Galon, he says, this sword's power is astonishing, but I beg you, do not learn to lean on it. A knight's strength is never the sword in his hand. Arthur Dane without Dawn is still the greatest swordsman in the 7 kingdoms. A farmer with Oathkeeper would lose to any knight. I understand, sir, I tell him. I do. The sword is the icing. I am the cake. He is satisfied. Switch to the wooden practice sword, he says. Today's lesson begins. His way of teaching me is wonderfully simple. He never has me spar with him. He has spent 2 years building me from the foundation up. Grip. Generation of force from the core. Footwork. Never rushing forward. Never permitting bad habit. My foundation is strong. Now we are working on precision. 2 months ago, he set me to standing before the dummy and to him calling out target areas: heart, liver, spleen, lungs, head, neck, hands. And I had to whip the wooden sword in and strike that exact spot within a second of his calling it. I can now hit any target he names within a heartbeat. He has moved up to a harder drill, a basket of sour green apples from the hills around the hall, and he stands across from me and throws them, and I, holding the wooden sword like a baseball bat, must strike the apple out of the air. In the first weeks I could not hit any of them, and was hit several times myself, until my brow lost its pride and learned to track. Now I hit 1 out of 3. Goodwin throws at 70% of his strength, which is fast. When I can hit every apple, he says, he will replace them with green dates the size of olives. Fast, accurate, ruthless. That is the heart of the sword, he tells me. I find I agree. We end the lesson when the basket is empty and the sun is sliding low. Goodwin wipes his eyes and looks at the empty basket and tells me, smiling, not to go back to the hall yet. Earl Selwyn has asked him to bring me down to the meadow outside Sapphire town. There will be an execution before the sun sets. An execution, I say, mopping sweat from my neck with my sleeve. 2 rapists, he says calmly. I nod. In Westeros, rapists are hanged or beheaded. My father, like Lord Stark, carries out the sentence with his own hand, partly to hear any last grievance, partly to make plain the Lord's authority. He has had me watch 2 such executions before. He is already preparing his eldest son to inherit the chair. We mount and ride down towards Sapphire Port through the evening. There are 3 towns on Tarth: Sapphire Town, Swordgrass Town, and Seahorse Town. Sapphire Town is the largest because it sits beside Sapphire Port, the best harbor on the island. Hangings and headings happen on the meadow outside the town walls. By the time we reach it, a crowd has gathered. My father's guard, several knights I know, 30 or 40 townsfolk. Heads turn at our hoofbeats. Young Master Galon, the cry goes up, and a path is cleared. The hum of conversation thickens when they see the sword at my back. The news has had only a day and a half to spread, but on an island this size, that is enough. The small folk are already whispering that Galon Tarth, sharing the name of Galon of Mourn, has found Oathkeeper at Mourn's Point, and that perhaps the young master is the legend Reborn. Within another half-month every soul on Tarth will know it, and I shall not be just the heir. I shall be a name spoken in awe. Father, I greet, and dismount. My father stands in the center of the field with both hands resting on the crosspiece of a heavy greatsword, wearing black leather gloves, his face solemn. He smiles only when he sees me. In front of him kneel 2 men, hands bound, both wretched. One is thin and yellow-haired and limp, his head bowed in resignation. The other is bald and burly and scarred, half an ear missing, eyes savage and fixed on my father. My father wastes no further time. He draws the greatsword from the earth and looks down at the yellow-haired man. Brass, son of Glyn, do you have any words to say in your defense? Brass mumbles, his pale lips parted, and shakes his head and says nothing. My father intones the long sentence. In the name of Heiress II of House Targaryen, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, I, Selwyn of House Tarth, Lord of Tarth, sentence you to die. And at the last word the longsword comes down clean. The head leaves the body in a wet crunch. The blood sprays. The head hits the ground. My heart skips, but only that. I do not need to vomit. I do not even feel ill. Goodwin notices the steadiness of my eye and gives a small approving nod. So do several knights, and the more observant of the townsfolk. My father glances back at me and is satisfied. He turns to the second man, Sagari, son of Mudan. Do you have any words to say in your defense? The bald man, looking at the headless body of his fellow, has been pushed past fear and into rage. Defend what? He sneers. That woman was so moist. I took her. What of it? Who are you to judge me just because you are some damned lord? Sooner or later the heads of you Tarths will be in the dirt too, and the women in your castle will be ravished as that woman was. And that day is not far off. Ha. A brown-haired knight steps in and kicks Sagari face first into the ground and stuffs a filthy rag into his mouth. and ties it there. My father's expression has not changed. He raises the greatsword and begins, "In the name of the Andals," and I all at once interrupt him. "Wait a moment," I say. Every face in the meadow turns toward me. "My father," I say, "could you let me do it? I have no stage fright." I take a step forward. With a clean shing, I draw Oathkeeper from my back, and the cyan glow of the blade and the faint dawn line of orange along its edge speak for me where my 8-year-old voice would not. A reason that would have sounded like nothing more than a child's bravado to anyone in this meadow has come to me in a flash. The data on my panel needs judgment points. Judgment points. Surely they come from passing judgment. Surely the way to find out is the man kneeling at my father's feet. "You," my father says, his face a careful mask of surprise. But he sets his sword down. He has told himself twice in 2 days to let me try things that do not match the small shape of an 8-year-old life. Other lords would have shouted at a son for this presumption. He only steps back and nods at me and gives up his place. The meadow goes silent and tight. I stand before the bald man with both hands on Oathkeeper, the blade laid across the back of his neck, and I make my voice as solemn as my body will allow. "Sagari, son of Mudan, your actions have violated the law and your crimes are unforgivable. In the name of the morning, I sentence you to death. There is no further hesitation." I lift Oathkeeper and bring it down with everything in me. Cyan and orange flash together with a strange small metallic hum. Sagari's head leaves him and bounces twice on the dirt. There is no spray of blood, which surprises everyone who sees it. The cut neck is charred, and a thin curl of smoke rises from the stump, and there is a faint sizzling sound. And that is all. The crowd has gone still. The sword has felt to me like cutting a rope, easy beyond anything a sword should be. The first kill of my new life is also somehow not a thing I find difficult to bear. I can think only of the panel. I pull it up. Galon Tarth. Title, None. Strength 3.12. Agility 4.1. Spirit 12.8. Magic blank. Skills the same as before. Bloodlines the same. Legendary pet none. Judgment points 2. 2 judgment points. My heart pounds. I have guessed correctly, so this is how the points come in. I do not yet know whether any death will earn them or only an executed criminal earns them, but the principle is now clear. I close the panel without spending the points. I am 8 years old and I am not going to dance with joy after lopping off a head, no matter how sharp the urge. And I look down at the headless body and find I feel only a small distaste, not disgust. A man's corpse is, in the end, not very different from a butchered animal. Blood and meat and stilled muscle. It is the spillage of intestines and viscera that the books and shows had taught me to fear. And in this killing there has been almost none. "You did well," my father says, and steps over and lays a hand on my shoulder. He has decided, in his own way, that the bald man's curses provoked me, and that I have done the cleaner of the 2 beheadings out of righteous anger. He approves. He had not thought a son of his would dare to take a head at 8. Many noble children at this age dare not even watch. I look out at the small folk, and they have not dispersed. They are staring at me with the sword still in my hand, and the chant begins low and quiet. Galon, Galon, Galadon of Mornay, and grows until 30 or 40 voices are doing it together, half whisper and half prayer, and I do not know what to do with that. I wave at them with what I hope is a faint, dignified smile. "Let's go home, father," I murmur, and he nods, and we ride back to Evenfall Hall. I make some excuse to wash, and I hurry up the spiral stair to the bathtub, where Galena has already laid out hot water. I send her into her alcove. I sink into the warm. I open the panel. The 2 judgment points still sit there beside that awkward little number. I look at the rest. The plus by magic is gray, unspendable. The legendary weapon is maxed, no plus to spend on. There is no legendary pet. That leaves strength, agility, and the bloodlines. I really want to spend 2 points on a bloodline. On the Targaryen one, of course, but I do not yet know what 2 points to a bloodline look like, and if I cannot see the effect after spending, I shall never know whether I have wasted them. So for the first allocation, I shall play it safe, a basic attribute where I shall feel the difference. Strength or agility. After a breath, I choose strength, the most obvious of all sensations. I tap the small gray plus by strength twice with my mind. 2 ghostly golden plus signs flicker. The judgment points line drops to blank. The strength line ticks from 3.12 to 3.14. A wave of heat rises through every part of me at once, hotter than the bathwater by a long way. It is not unbearable. It is something like blood that has begun to boil but has the courtesy not to scald. The heat settles outward from blood into muscle into cell, and I feel it sink at last into bone. A long soft sigh leaves me without my permission. Galena's voice from the alcove asks worriedly if the water is too hot. I tell her no, that I have only strained myself in the afternoon's training, and she relaxes. The interruption has cost me. By the time I have answered her, the warmth has dissipated, and the panel improvement is no longer a thing I can feel happening, but a thing that has happened. I press my fingers against the wooden rim of the tub. The strength is there. It is not Hercules, but it is plain. The fatigue and soreness of the afternoon have vanished. A .02 of strength, in real terms, has done for me what perhaps a week of training would have done. The shape of my future shifts in front of me. If a normal Tarth heir improves from strength 3 to strength 4 over a decade of growth and hard work, that is less than .002 per day. I have just bought myself more than a week. 2 judgment points has bought me more than a week. The implication is enormous, and the constraint is also enormous. I have to find more judgment points, regularly, or this engine starves. I think instantly of the yellow-haired brass whom my father had taken first, before I had spoken up. A wasted prisoner. 2 points, given to the wind. I have to do better. I will have to talk my father into letting me carry out the sentences from now on. I dress quickly, and Galena helps me, and I go down to the hall. My father is playing with Brienne in front of the fire. She breaks into a delighted smile when she sees me. Brother, she calls, and lifts her fat little arms. I cross to them and lift her up. She is heavier than she was a season ago and growing fast, but my new strength holds her without trouble. Do you feel Brienne is a little heavier again? My father teases. He is also faintly puzzled. Brienne is plainly outpacing other girls her age, and Maester Armand saying that she will grow tall is starting to look less like a guess and more like a fact. I tell him she is fine, no weight at all, and pinch her cheek because she will hate hearing herself called heavy, and the little girl is sensitive. She closes her eyes and gives my father a smug sidelong glance. He laughs and tells Claude to have the maid serve dinner. Over the meal he asks me how it had felt today. I tell him it was good and pause. And I tell him slowly I seem to feel an unusual kind of power. What do you mean? I work my words. I felt that Oathkeeper was excited. My father's mouth opens and his eyes widen. Claude, he says without taking his eyes from me. Take Brienne to the kitchens for now. Claude understands at once and lifts Brienne out of my father's arms. Brienne goes unwillingly, but the kitchens are a place of strong attraction for her, and she allows herself to be led. When the hall is empty of any ear but ours, my father leans forward. Galon, what are you saying? I think, I tell him. After I had killed that man, Oathkeeper seemed pleased. It increased my strength. Not by much, but it was unmistakable. I tell only as much as I need to. He is my father, my natural ally, and the lord of the island. 2 of us pulling together will move further than one of me pulling alone. He stares at me for a long moment, his chest rising and falling. He half believes me already. My face is not a face that is joking, and I have no reason to make a joke of this. An Oathkeeper is the holy sword bestowed by the Maiden of the Seven, and if any sword in the world might do such a thing, this is the sword. To increase one's strength by slaying the wicked, he thinks. Could his son truly grow into a hero like Galon? May the Seven bless us. House Tarth shall finally rise. He stops himself and gathers his wits and says, I understand, Galon. After dinner, come with me somewhere. Where, I ask. Outside it is already dark. I will take you to verify what you describe, he answers. I have a fair idea of where he means. We finish the meal. Brienne returns, riding triumphantly on Claude's hip with a blueberry tart in one fist. The wet nurse takes her up to bed for a story. The other servants are dismissed. My father takes a torch in each hand and leads me through the dark courtyard toward the low tower in the southeast corner of Evenfall Hall. Claude asks, mildly, where we are going so late. My father tells him only to bring 2 torches. Claude does not ask twice. The man knows his lord's temper. If the lord has not said, the lord does not wish him to know. A steward learns to do more and ask less. I watch the exchange and find I admire my father all over again. Claude is his most trusted assistant, and yet he is not telling Claude what is happening. Not because he distrusts Claude, but because the fewer people who know a secret, the safer the secret is. He is clear-eyed even in his joy. I had told him just enough of my abilities, and I had been right to do it. The heir to Evenfall Hall I might be, but at 8 I cannot mobilize an island. He can. With one word he can take me out at night to farm prisoners. That is what we are about to do. The low tower in the southeast corner sits over Evenfall Hall's dungeon. 2 guards salute as we approach, and one opens the heavy door and leads us down a spiral stone stair. The cold rises around me as I descend. The stair opens onto a long corridor lit by torches and iron sconces in the stone walls. From a side room, a tall, lean, slightly stooped, one-eyed man emerges in a gray robe, his greasy hair in disarray. The guard behind us bows, takes back his torch and goes back upstairs. The one-eyed man, my cousin Moen by a branch of House Tarth, addresses my father. My lord, why have you brought Galon down here? It is dark and dirty and might frighten the young master. My father shakes his head. Moen, Galon is not as fragile as you think. Hello, Uncle Moen, I say. He nods at me with surprising softness. Moen had once been a different man. Over a decade ago, in an island raid, his pregnant wife was raped and murdered by pirates, and he has not been right since. My father took the field with him and slaughtered that pirate crew to a man. Moen lost an eye in that battle. The vengeance settled, the rest of him did not. He sank into drink. My father, unable to watch his cousin rot, gave him this post, torturing prisoners for the dungeon of Evenfall Hall. Some pleasure in that work has kept him on his feet these many years. He is short and unpleasant with most of the household. With me he is gentle. Perhaps because I am his lord's son. Perhaps because I remind him of the child his wife had been carrying. Moen, my father says, bring out the Lyseni stowaway from a couple of days ago, and Fisher, the one who killed the merchant Grisha and his family. Make sure they're tightly bound. The eyebrow goes up, but the question stays in. Moen disappears into the dungeon, and returns with 2 men. hands chained behind backs, ankles shackled. One is a Lysini of extreme paleness, with curly mussed hair and a thin frame and a terrified face. The other is heavily built, sinister-eyed, hook-nosed, perhaps 30, and his name is Fisher. Fisher had murdered the merchant Grisha and Grisha's family in their own house, and made off with a hidden treasure. He had been caught, but the treasure had not. Moen has both gagged with rags secured by extra rope, lest they call out and disturb the young master. Moen, my father, says, "Please step away. This matter is rather important. I will explain when I have time." The curiosity in Moen's eye is enormous, but he nods and goes upstairs to drink with Claude. There are casks of Golden Arbor wine come in with a recent caravan, he tells himself. The dungeon empties of all eyes but ours. I draw Oathkeeper. The blue glow on the blade is strikingly visible in the gloom and the torchlight, and the gloom even seems to make the glow look more beautiful. I think, as I draw, how shrewdly my father has chosen. A Lysini stowaway who has likely offended a noble in Lys and committed no real crime, and a vicious murderer of a whole family. He is helping me test the rule. Does the sword feed on any death, or only on the death of the wicked? The Lysini, kicked over to the floor, lets out a low, terrified moan from his throat. I do not waste words for him. I step forward and sweep Oathkeeper across his neck. I do not use both hands. I do not use my full strength, 60 or 70%, single-handed. The cyan arc traces the air. The head goes. There is no spray, only red charred edges and the small curl of smoke. I open the panel. Judgment points, 0. I frown. Nothing. There are two possibilities. The first is that judgment requires a true crime, and the Lyseni had committed none worth the sword. The second is that the system has a cooldown, a span of rest before the next valid execution will earn its points. While I am thinking, Fisher is struggling on the ground, eyes growing more ferocious. He had not expected to be brought up at all so late, and certainly not for an heir's sword. His treasure has not yet been wrung from him, and now it seems his throat will not have time to give it. It didn't work, my father says calmly, ignoring the struggling. I shake my head. Try again then, he says, and points at Fisher. He is not disappointed. Fisher thrashes harder, his eyes more savage. I walk over to him, raise Oathkeeper, and in case the procedure must be exact, I make sure to mutter the formula I had used in the meadow. In the name of the morning, I sentence you to death. I bring the sword down. Crack. Fisher's head bounces. To Oathkeeper, a body is no more than cardboard. I open the panel. Strength 3.14, Agility 4.1, Spirit 12.8, Skills the same, Bloodlines the same, Judgment points 0. Still nothing. My head begins to ache. The procedure is correct. I have even spoken the formula. Fisher is a murderer with conclusive evidence, a worse criminal than the bald man this afternoon. Why has nothing happened? There must be a cooldown. There must be. It is the only thing that fits, and if I am honest, it is also the right design. Because if there were no cooldown, a man with a holy sword and a panel could grind out invincibility in a single afternoon, and even a dragon would be one stroke before him. The world cannot allow that. I tell my father, "Father, it still didn't work." He does not suspect me of having lied to him at dinner. He asks instead what I think the reason is. Perhaps I venture, there must be some time between uses for the effect to renew. He thinks for a moment and nods. I understand, he says. I'll bring you back tomorrow. I almost choke on the gratitude that rises in me. Any other lordly father, hearing such a story from his son and seeing no result after 2 heads taken, would be furious. Mine is already planning the next experiment with me. I give him in my mind a quiet thumbs up. We climb the stair and go out into the night. He tells the guards at the door, when Moen returns, to help him dispose of the bodies in the dungeon. We walk back to the great hall. I go to my room and stare for a moment at the panel and at the inactive 0, and then I close it and tell myself, with my father in this with me, the answer will come. In the morning, Maester Armand teaches me as usual, and Brienne joins us this time. My sister is well behaved, lively as a pup with me, but obedient with the Maester, never rebellious. And when the Maester sets her aside with a picture book, she sits and reads it with serious attention. After my lesson, the Maester goes to her and uses the pictures to teach her first words of the common tongue. The morning passes that way. In the afternoon, I go to the Godswood again to train with Goodwin. We do swordsmanship and archery. Archery is frankly more fun than swordsmanship, and my talent for it is a little stronger. Aiming, drawing, and releasing are all already standardized in this body, and what I lack is only the practice that turns motion into instinct. To my slight surprise, as the lesson nears its end, I begin to hit the center of the target several shots in a row. I open the panel quietly. Archery has gone from 7 to 8%. A small thing, but a real one. I do not know whether the previous Galon had been at the edge of a bottleneck, or whether the firmness of my new soul has improved my comprehension. Either way, I am pleased. I bid Goodwin farewell and hurry back to the hall. My father is already waiting. A maid hands me a hot towel. I wipe sweat from my face and neck, and follow him again to the southeastern dungeon. The day's guards are different from the night's. Moen is not at the door this time. From deeper in the dungeon, I hear the wet wails of a man being interrogated. My father calls his name. After a while, there is the clang of a door, and Moen comes out wiping bloodstains from his hands on a piece of burlap. My father tells him to bring out 2 prisoners as before. He does not ask. He goes back inside and returns shortly with 2 prisoners, hands and feet bound. The first is a burly old man with a white beard, once a warrior, now a fisherman. Recently, in a quarrel with another fisherman, he held a grudge, and one day at sea he kicked the other man over the side. The man he kicked overboard was not so easily drowned. He washed up alive at Storm's End, came back by ship to Tarth, and laid a complaint with my father. The old fisherman has been waiting in the dungeon for a hearing. The second is a middle-aged woman, panicked, mean-faced. After her husband's death, she had abused his 7-year-old daughter, making her sleep in the pigsty, eat pig slop, beating her with iron tools, until a neighbor reported her. My father had locked her up, intending to choose a day to hang her. Moen kicks her over onto the dirty floor. He does not lay a hand on the old man. The old man kneels, holds his head high, and says nothing. My father waves Moen away. Moen smiles and goes upstairs, perceptive as ever. I draw Oathkeeper. I cross to the woman. In the name of the morning, I sentence you to death. I say without flourish, and bring the sword down in a single clean stroke. Crack. Her head joins the others on the floor. I do not waste a moment. I open the panel. Galon Tarth. Title, none. Strength 3.14. Agility 4.1. Spirit 12.8. Magic, blank. Skills, swordsmanship 3. Archery now 8. Writing 4. Common tongue, 27. Swimming 29. Legendary bloodlines. Blood of the Evenstar 3. Targaryen 0. Storm King 1. Legendary weapon. Oathkeeper. Gold. Maxed. Legendary pet. None. Judgment points 3. I actually got 3. My heart leaps. The cooldown theory has held, and the points have come for the wicked, and the mean-faced abuser of a child has earned me 3 where the bald rapist had earned me 2. The number itself is a quiet judgment of crime against crime. The system rewards the heavier guilt. The kneeling old man watches me with a small puzzled frown. He had not expected the Lord to bring his son to the dungeon to take heads, and he had not expected the boy to wield a sword like that. But his stare matters less to me in this moment than the small word at the bottom of the panel. 3. The world has begun to open. 3 judgment points. I stare at the panel hovering in my mind, and I cannot help being a little surprised, because yesterday I only earned 2 for executing that bald rapist, and today, after taking the head of a woman who tortured her stepdaughter to death, the system has handed me 3. It must mean she carried other crimes I never learned about. Beating, stealing, perhaps worse. And the Holy Sword's judgment weighed her in full. From this I confirm 2 things at once. There is a cooldown of roughly 1 execution per day, and the points awarded scale with the depth of the sin the criminal carried. Now that I understand the rules, I am in a very good mood, and since Father is standing right beside me, there is no reason to wait. I open the panel and let my eyes drift across the numbers. Galon Tarth, title none, strength 3.14, agility 4.1, spirit 12.8, magic blank, swordsmanship at 3%, archery at 8, writing at 4, common tongue of Westeros at 27, swimming at 29. Below that, 3 legendary bloodlines. Blood of the Evenstar at 3% development. Targaryen bloodline at 0. Storm King bloodline at 1. The legendary weapon entry shows Oathkeeper, gold tier, already at maximum quality. Yesterday I spent my points on strength to test the system, so this time I want to experiment elsewhere. I tap the small plus sign beside swordsmanship. 3% jumps to 4% and a cool, clear sensation washes through the back of my mind. The principle Sir Godwin has been drilling into me, the way the wrist should pivot, the line a parry should travel, the timing of a thrust, settle into place with a clarity I never had before. A pulse of warmth flickers through my right wrist and is gone, leaving the joint feeling looser, more responsive, almost as if the bones have been quietly oiled. So 1 judgment point equals 1% of skill proficiency. I decide not to pour the rest into swordsmanship. Skills can be ground out through practice, while basic attributes and bloodlines are far harder to raise on their own. I let my gaze fall on the bloodline section and click the plus next to Targaryen bloodline. A soft buzz vibrates through my whole body. The panel deducts 1 point, and an invisible current rises inside me. Flames seem to leap behind my eyes. My skin goes flushed and hot, and for a moment I see roaring fires in some other place. Dragons wheeling on enormous wings against a black sky. The vision shakes me hard enough that I stumble, and only by driving Oathkeeper's tip into the stone slab am I able to stay upright. Father lurches forward at once, calling my name, his palm pressing against my forehead, and finding skin that feels almost feverish. Even my eyes, he tells me later, were rimmed with a strange orange glow. The reaction passes in only a few breaths. I steady myself against Father's arm and nod when he asks if it worked, and his composure cracks open into a wide, breathless grin he cannot contain. Wielding Oathkeeper to judge the wicked truly does strengthen the wielder. What a gift, what a holy sword the 7 have given us. House Tarth is going to rise. He gathers himself quickly, every inch the great noble again, and asks if we should continue. I shake my head and tell him it appears to be a once-a-day effect. We already proved that last night when the second prisoner produced no reaction. Father nods because he had suspected as much. His gaze settles on the white-haired old man bound near the wall, old-shaven, who served my grandfather in many wars. Father tells him quietly that he had originally meant to imprison him for a while and then let him go, but he has heard things he was never meant to hear, and so, he is sorry. The blade slides forward in a single decisive motion, the tip vanishing into the old man's back, and a dark crimson flower blooms across his chest. Old Shaven grunts once, looks up at me, looks at Father, and his eyes slowly dim, never understanding what the Lord and his son are really doing here. I watch Father wipe the blade and sheath it without hesitation, and I cannot help nodding inwardly. That old man could have been kept for tomorrow's execution, but Father feared a leak in the night and chose not to risk it. Decisive, cold when he needs to be. We climb back to the upper floor of the dungeon, where Moen sits cross-legged in the shadows nursing a flask of wine. Father asks him to dispose of the bodies, and Moen, who can read what has happened from the apologetic edge in Father's voice, opens his mouth as if to ask something, and then closes it again. He cannot quite understand why Lord Selwyn is bringing his 8-year-old son down here so often to kill, but my eyes look the same as ever, and Father's face permits no questions, so he only nods. We return to the Great Hall, and after dinner I play with Brienne for a while before going up to my room. By the window of my bedroom I open the panel again under starlight. The Targaryen bloodline now sits at 1%, exactly as I expected. I wonder how much further I will have to push the development before a dragon will recognize me as its master, before that legendary fire immunity manifests. The Red Comet, though, is still a long way off, so there is no point obsessing over the dragon line. Outside of dragon riding, the Targaryen bloodline does not seem to add much to raw combat power. I am more curious about what the blood of the Evenstar and the Storm King bloodline will reveal as their development climbs, since both of those belong to me by inheritance and could carry traits I have not even guessed at. With one judgment point still to spend, I tap agility, and the warm current returns. Gentler this time, less of a fire and more of a slow loosening through every joint. 4 or 5 seconds later it fades, and when I shadow step around the room, throwing a few light punches and twists, my body does feel a hair lighter, a hair quicker, though the change is much less dramatic than the strength jump. Agility 4.02, only a tiny gain, but I am not disappointed. The future is wide open. Father is going to back me with everything he has, and judgment points will keep coming. By 16 or 17 I will rival Rhaegar, Robert, even Ned, and perhaps catch Arthur Dayne himself. By 30, when the War of the Five Kings begins, I will be the strongest man in the Seven Kingdoms, perhaps with a dragon at my command. Galon of Morny reborn, plus a dragon rider. Why should House Tarth not eventually sit the Iron Throne? Father has no idea that his son is already daring to think this far. The next morning I study with Maester Armon and train with Sir Godwyn as usual. Sir Godwyn is openly astonished by the leap in my technique overnight, praising my swordsmanship, my strength, my agility, all visibly improved. And Father, watching from the edge of the Godswood, exchanges a quiet knowing smile with me. After training he takes me down to the dungeon again. Moen has prepared 2 prisoners and slips deeper into the cells the moment we arrive, professional discretion already in place. I judge the first man with a clean stroke, but the panel awards no points. When I ask Father what the man did, he tells me it was poaching. I understand at once. In this world, poaching in a lord's forest is punished by death or by the wall, but in the system's eyes it is not really sin, only a crime invented by lords for the convenience of lords. So the Holy Sword refuses to count it. Father had chosen the man on purpose, an experiment he wanted to confirm. I behead the second prisoner and the panel ticks up by 1 point. When I ask the second man's crime, Father strokes the signet on his finger with a strange expression and tells me incest. The man drove his own son out to sea so he could possess his daughter-in-law and even fathered a child by her. I look at the squat severed head on the floor and feel both disgust and a kind of weary amazement at how lurid human cruelty can be. He deserved to die. Apparently the system grades incest as genuine sin but minor sin, hence 1 point. Father asks if it is effective and I tell him it works, but only modestly. He nods. We have now confirmed the rule. Oathkeeper judges 1 sinner per day, and the deeper the sin, the greater the boon. Fitting enough, it is, after all, a holy sword granted by the Seven, and rewarding the punishment of true evil suits its purpose. From here on, my life settles into a clean, regular rhythm. Mornings with Maester Armon over geography and Valyrian, afternoons with Sir Godwyn over sword and bow, evenings spent quietly judging whatever sinner Father has procured. 2 years pass like wind through the sails. On a bright afternoon, Father, Brienne, and I stand at the Sapphire port docks among guards and household knights, watching for the white sails marked with the Arryn Falcon to round the headland. The ship is from the Vale, but the important name on board is Robert Baratheon, eldest son of House Baratheon, on his way home from the Eyrie to Storm's End. The cause of this journey is a small one with enormous future weight. Duke Stefan Baratheon and his wife have given Robert a baby brother, and that brother's name is Renly. Renly Baratheon. I let the name sit in my mind for a moment, knowing exactly which knight in green armor it will one day become, and feel time tightening like a drawn bowstring around me. The continent of Westeros has always run on the fostering custom. Highborn sons are sent to be raised in the halls of equal lords, sometimes as wards to seal an alliance, sometimes as hostages dressed in the same clothes, sometimes simply as a vote of confidence from one father to another that another man can raise his heir better than he can himself. It is an arrangement that frequently outweighs marriage in political weight. Duke Stephen Baratheon sent Robert to Jon Arryn at the Eyrie because he believed Jon's character and judgment would shape his son better than his own court at Storm's End. Imagine being Jon Arryn receiving such a request. Stephen trusts me so completely that he is handing over his future heir, the next Lord of the Stormlands. That is not friendship, that is sworn brotherhood. And in turn, Robert grows up loving Jon Arryn as much as his real father, perhaps more, because the time spent together at impressionable ages reshapes the shape of one's heart. When the War of the Usurper finally erupted, the Falcon, the Wolf, and the Stag stood together as if welded, and the alliance that came out of two fostering decisions swept House Targaryen from the throne. Even after the war, with Robert crowned king, Jon Arryn was named Hand of the King and rarely contradicted him, the bond never breaking. Even later, when Jon Arryn himself was dying, he was already arranging to send his sickly son to Stannis at Dragonstone for fostering, hoping that grim, upright Stannis would harden the boy where his own indulgence had softened him. Fostering is the political wisdom of Westeros made flesh. The Robert I am about to meet has been at the Eyrie since the age of 8. He is 15 now, which means 7 full years of Jon Arryn's hand on him. House Baratheon and House Arryn are bound tight as iron rings. I cannot help feeling a small pang of regret. If I had been 3 or 4 years older, Father could have sent me to the Eyrie too, and I, Ned, and Robert could have been the 3 musketeers of the usurpation, raised together, riding together, dying for one another. But I am 4 years younger than Ned and 5 years younger than Robert. Even if I had gone, the gap in age would have kept us apart, and Robert would already have been chasing tavern girls while I was still doing letter drills with Maester Armon. A pleasant fantasy, nothing more. Brother, are we going to Storm's End together tomorrow too? Brienne's voice tugs me out of my drifting thoughts. She is 6 now and almost as tall as a 2nd or 3rd grade child from my old life. She wears a light green linen short dress, a small white scarf tied at the collar, and a soft brown cord at the waist. She looks well behaved, but if you study the lines under the cloth, you can see her body is already broad and dense, sturdier than any little girl her age has any right to be. 2 years have stretched me too. At 10, I am already a clean 5 feet and change, and on the rate I am going, I will sail past 1.8 meters in another few years, perhaps even up toward 2 meters like Brienne is destined for. Today I wear a dark gray linen shirt under a long black overcoat, plain leather belt, slim black trousers, Oathkeeper slung in its scabbard across my back. My features are sharpening. The eyes are deeper. The jawline is starting to set. I rest my right hand on Brienne's shoulder, pull her in, and ask her if she wants to go. She nods so hard her ponytail snaps, eyes bright as glass. Of course I will take her. The last 2 years I've done little but train and study. This is a chance to finally see Storm's End and meet the Highborn of Westeros face to face. While we talk, the orange ship draws closer and I can pick out 2 figures on the bow. One is tall with a great head of dense black hair. The other is leaner, narrower in the face. Robert's combat strength was monstrous before wine and women rotted him out. On paper, in his prime, only Arthur Dayne could match the edge of him. Rhaegar was the champion of the Lannisport tourney just 2 years ago, and yet Robert hammered him to death at the Trident. I have to step up in the years to come, because I want to surpass even him. I open the panel and let my eyes drink in 2 years of progress. Galon Tarth, strength 8.76, agility 8.9, Spirit 15.3, mana blank, swordsmanship 21%, archery 33%, riding 19%, common tongue 41%, swimming 4%, Valyrian 19%, bloodlines Evenstar 5%, Targaryen 1%, Oathkeeper gold, maxed, pet, none, judgment points 0. The strength and agility are nearly at adult knight level already, and archery is creeping towards seasoned archer territory. In actual combat, I can probably hold my own against any veteran on Tarth. None of this came from nothing. Father quietly bought criminal slaves out of the free cities of Essos, and I have judged at least 80 if not 100 of them in 2 years. By 16, 20 in strength and agility alike will be perfectly possible, since the next few years will see explosive physical growth on top of the system's leveraging. With base attributes that high, plus my swordsmanship, riding an Oathkeeper, a top 5 tourney finish anywhere in Westeros would be reasonable. The spirit climb from 12.8 to 15.3 came as a small surprise. Since I never spent points on it, I suspect a portion was natural growth and a portion came from drilling with Maester Armon. The benefit is obvious. My memory has sharpened. My thinking is faster, my reactions in sparring are uncannily precise. Against Sir Godwyn with wooden swords I can now last over 30 rounds without taking a hit, and Sir Godwyn does not hold back. When I finally have surplus points to spare, I will pour some into spirit too, because nervous reaction speed has a way of deciding duels. The shouts of drop anchor, hold tight, throw the ropes ring out, sailors and dock hands answering each other across the gap, and I can finally see the two boys clearly. One has a lean face and sharp features, light brown curls, a steady gaze tinged with reserve. The other is tall and thickly built, handsome and well-proportioned, with deep blue eyes, a heavy fall of black hair, and a careless smile that seems to always be lurking on his lips. The tall one is unmistakably Robert. The lean one I recognize at a glance. Eddard Stark, ward of Jon Arryn alongside Robert. The two of them inseparable as brothers. With Robert getting a new little brother, of course Ned has come along to help carry the joy back to Storm's End. Looking at 14-year-old Ned, I feel an odd ripple. He is significantly younger than the Ned I remember from the screen of my old life, even more boyish than the actor who once played Robb. And yet that stern, unsmiling face is already there, exactly the face that lets me confirm his identity before he says a word. Lord Selwyn, it has been too long. How have you been? Robert is shouting from the deck before the gangplank is even down, and Father shouts back, equally hearty, that Robert looks splendid, that he has grown into a man. The last time Father saw him, he was a tall 12-year-old still rounded with boy fat. Now at 15, he is already 6.5 feet tall and built like a young oak. As the lines are tied off, Robert simply leaps from the deck onto the pier, landing on the boards with a thud that announces his strength as effectively as any introduction. Father gives a small approving nod. Jon Arryn has clearly raised him well in body and bearing. Robert grins, claps a hand to his own chest, and then waves Ned forward. Lord Selwyn, this is my good brother Ned, second son of Lord Stark of the North. Ned steps forward and bows his head a precise measured fraction, voice low and even, calling Father my lord. Father returns the courtesy and asks after Lord Rickard's health, deliberately echoing the nickname Ned to plant a familiar tone, and Ned answers that his father is well, kept too busy by the North to travel south. Father nods. The Starks rarely leave the North, so this is no surprise. Robert, it has been a while, I say, stepping forward at last. House Tarth and House Baratheon have intermarried for generations, and we are distantly cozened, so we know each other. Galon, long time no see. Even up at the Eyrie, I have heard your name 100 times these past 2 years, Robert says with a booming laugh and slaps a hand on my shoulder, his eyes already pulled toward the hilt of Oathkeeper rising over my back. I shrug helplessly. The story has spread far. Many nobles still believe House Tarth invented the legend, but anyone in the Stormlands or along the eastern coast has already accepted it as real, because I have never gone to any particular trouble to hide Oathkeeper. I only use it for executions. Anyone curious enough to ask is told the truth. Galon, is this the holy sword? Can you draw it? Can I see it? Robert asks, patience already thin to the point of fraying. I shake my head with a small smile. He is as impulsive as the history suggested, barely off the ship and already begging for the blade. I turn instead to Ned, polite, formal, telling him my name. He answers hello Galon and gives me a small smile that sits awkwardly on top of his usual stoic face, and I cannot help being amused. Robert keeps pestering, his arms slung across my shoulders despite our height difference, his eyes locked on the inscription circling the blue gem at the pommel. Oathkeeper. I tell him to wait until we are inside Evenfall Hall. If I draw a blade the moment he steps off the boat, Father will scold me for poor hospitality. Father nods his approval. Servants bring up horses, and we ride the short stretch from the docks to the castle, Robert pointing out scenery to Ned with proprietary pride, Ned nodding repeatedly and clearly impressed. Tarth is far more beautiful and prosperous than the rough, half-frozen Bear Island country he is used to. In the Great Hall, the maids have laid out the welcoming meal already. Long tables with flowers and candles, bread and salt being placed in their proper places. Steward Claude brings the bread and salt forward, and Robert and Ned partake. Ned takes a small, careful bite of the bread, dips a single fingertip in the salt, tastes it. Robert grabs the bread in one fist, takes a savage bite, scoops salt with the loaf for the second bite, and washes the whole thing down with milk Amade is handed up. 2 bites and half the loaf is gone. Father laughs softly. He plainly approves of Robert's straightforwardness, and pats his shoulder. He then sends them upstairs to wash and change before the meal proper. Once they are gone, Father turns to me and asks for my assessment. Robert is bold and hearty, rough on the surface but shrewd in what matters, and his future achievements will be considerable, I tell him. As for Ned, he is a little too straightforward for politics. If he ever crosses paths with a real schemer, I fear he will be eaten alive. Father nods approvingly. Robert will be your liege lord. Keep that relationship close. I know, Father, I tell him. Robert is not just going to be Lord of Storm's End. This man is going to sit the Iron Throne, and his ascent, casual as it will look on the surface, is essentially preordained. Of all the houses in the 7 kingdoms, after House Targaryen, only House Baratheon sits high enough, and only Robert carries dragon blood through Rhael Targaryen. To be a candidate every great house can stomach. Try setting Ned on the throne, or Tywin. The houses would never stop fighting until the realm was in pieces. My own plan is simple. Stand firmly under House Baratheon, build my advantage during the War of the Usurper, and wait. House Tarth is still a small house, with neither the reputation or the strength to bid for the throne yet. I have to grow step by step. Robert is generous, and House Tarth is both kin and sworn vassal. As long as I deliver real service, he will not be stingy with reward. The War of the Five Kings will be my real stage. By the time it begins, I will be in my early 30s, at the absolute peak of my body, my martial power overwhelming, my lands and influence prepared, perhaps even with a dragon. By then, whether I rise as a new usurper or rule through a puppet, either path will be open. Footsteps on the stairs interrupt me. Robert and Ned, washed and changed, come down side by side. Galon, now will you show me the sword? Robert asks, his eyes already greedy. Ned glances over too, his curiosity less bare but no less real. He has been hearing about Oathkeeper from Jon Arryn and Robert for months, and he wants to compare it to his own family's ancestral greatsword Ice. All right, I tell him, but I would advise you not to try to handle it. I unfasten Oathkeeper and lay the scabbard on the long table, then draw the blade. The crisp ringing sound of the steel coming free echoes in the hall, and a flash of clear, almost liquid green light flickers across Robert and Ned's faces. They both stop dead. The blade is simply too beautiful, emitting a pale greenish glow, the metal flowing like running water or burning flame, without a single flaw, with a faint shimmering orange line along the edge as if dawn itself had been forged into the steel. The crossguard and ivory hilt are understated, noble, a perfect complement. Robert's mouth hangs open. Ned holds his breath. Both of their gazes are sunk into the sword, drowning, unable to look away. In an age where magic has supposedly vanished, seeing Oathkeeper is no different from witnessing magic with your own eyes. Robert even begins to wonder if the Seven, whom he has never bothered to revere, might actually exist after all. Galon, can I try it? Robert asks, breathing harder than he should. Ned, normally rigid, lets a quiet flicker of want cross his face too. They both want to grip the hilt. I shake my head and give a small smile, only repeating the warning once, and let the sword sit on the table for them to inspect. They lean in close, and the longer they look, the more naked the envy grows in their eyes. Robert is suddenly conscious that the fine steel greatsword Jon Arryn had custom made for him last year is unimpressive. Ned is suddenly conscious that Ice, the ancestral greatsword his father treasures, is plain compared to this. Robert, true to himself, cannot resist. His fingers actually close on the hilt, and immediately he yanks them back with a hiss, sucking cold air through his teeth. Across his right fingertips, a charred red mark has appeared as if he touched a brand. Lucky he is fast. It will heal in days. I cannot help shaking my head. Words are always wasted on him. Robert scratches his scalp, embarrassed. The rumor that no other hand can hold my holy sword turns out to be true. Ned glances at his own twitching hands, glances at Robert's burned fingers, glances at me and father, and decides not to chance it. Galon, how did you find it? Is this really the holy sword the maiden gave Galladon of Mornay in the legends? Robert asks, sucking on his fingers. I shrug. Found it by accident, I tell him. I do not know if it really came from the Seven, but it is sharp, and I could not care less about the rest. Robert smacks his lips with mixed expressions. Damn it, I am so jealous. Galon, this does not look like Valyrian steel, Ned says quietly, his eyes still wondering. I nod. He is right. Valyrian steel has a dark gray, almost black metallic luster, and that distinctive water pattern across the blade. Oathkeeper is blue-green, glowing faintly, the kind of weapon that in my old life would have looked like a top-tier glowing item from a video game. Several tiers above Valyrian. The system rates Oathkeeper gold, which means there must be blue and purple ratings somewhere above that. Sir Godwyn, I tell them, says my sword is sharper than Arthur Dayne's Dawn. Both of them go quiet, then share a stunned look. Forget Dawn. Neither of them even owns Valyrian steel. House Baratheon is too young to have an inherited Valyrian blade, and House Stark has ice, but it belongs to Lord Rickard, and will pass to Brandon, never to Ned. They are at the precise age, 14 and 15, when boys hunger most for legendary weapons, and Oathkeeper has just kicked them in the chest. Just how sharp is it? Robert asks. Cuts through plate armor with one stroke, I tell him. They both widen their eyes. Robert's expression turns serious and disbelieving. I am not joking. 2 years ago, at strength 3.12, I could nearly cleave plate. At 8.76, I can shear it one-handed if I swing at full force. After lunch, I will show you, I say. He cannot wait to see it. The luncheon is sumptuous. Roast wild boar with honey and clove, crispy roasted venison leg drizzled with blackberry sauce, creamy stewed mushrooms and onions, salted herring with sour cream, roasted pigeon stuffed with apples and raisins, a cheese platter with honeycomb. The wine is just as varied: strong Dornish red, golden arbor wine, Taroshi pear brandy, Myrish green mead, dark Volantine beer. Robert, only 15, has already started drinking and praises every cup of Tarth hospitality. In the middle of the meal, he lifts his goblet. Lord Selwyn, besides visiting you and Galon and Brienne, my father bid me to invite you to Storm's End tomorrow, to my brother Renly's name day. If you do not come, my father will surely scold me. I nod inwardly. So Robert is rough but attentive to detail. His pleasantries are flawless and his emotional intelligence is high. In the original, he is mostly playing the fool because that is the role that suits him, but he understands everything underneath. Ned, by contrast, really is what he looks like, simple and led in circles by everyone. Father raises his cup with a smile, says I will gladly bring Galon and Brienne to Storm's End, and the two empty their cups together. I drink a little wine with them. The rule about minors not drinking is nonsense in this world, and besides, my legendary bloodlines and reinforced physique seem to give me a remarkable tolerance. 3 Roberts under the table is a fair guess. After lunch we rest. As dusk settles, Robert hauls Ned out to find me again, demanding the demonstration. I take them, plus a few attendants, to the Godswood. With one casual sweep, Oathkeeper takes a waist-thick deadwood log clean through, the cut so smooth the wood barely creaks before it falls. Robert and Ned stare as if at a ghost. Even at the eerie, swinging branches at long grass, they have never seen a single cut do this. I walk them up to the great training post, where I first tested the sword, where the slanted cuts already mark the wood. They go cold looking at it. A one-handed slanted slash takes a millstone-sized chunk out of the post. Wood splits along its grain with a slick splitting sound, and the chunk slides down into the grass, kicking up dark mud. Both of them swallow hard. Suddenly, the claim about plate armor does not seem like boasting. Robert's breathing turns ragged at the thought of what Oathkeeper would do in a real duel or a battlefield. And the secondary thought, that I am his future vassal, rolls through him like a barrel of chilled wine. How about it, I ask. Do you need to see it on plate armor too? Robert gives a bitter smile. I have already seen, he says, pointing across the grass to the rusted plate armor strapped to a training dummy not far away, scored with several huge gashes across the chest. That is the armor Sir Godwyn took off 2 years ago and left here for me to hack at. It has been baking in the rain ever since. Ned hurries over to look at it more closely, finds the cuts unfaithful to anything he has ever seen a weapon do, and shudders at the thought of being inside the plate when those cuts came down. It has been a while since I tested it anyway, I tell them, and walk forward casually, gripping Oathkeeper one-handed. At 2 or 3 meters from the dummy, I flick the wrist, reverse my grip, and slash diagonally upward from below. A sharp clang of metal and a shower of sparks, and the breastplate snaps on contact. The shattered front and back are sliced clean in two, and the wooden dummy parts company with itself in the same instant. Robert and Ned suck in a breath together. Ned's faith almost wavers. Could this really have been forged by mortal hands? Galon, you brat, you will be the next sword of the morning, Robert says, recovering enough to clap my shoulder. I demur, modestly, and he flashes a sudden mischievous grin and turns toward Ned. Hey Ned, how about we give Galon some pointers on his swordsmanship with wooden swords? Ned twitches his lips, plainly aware of the bullying setup his oldest friend is proposing, and before he can object I am already smiling. Sure, I tell them. I have been worrying about not having sparring partners. I sheathe Oathkeeper, set it aside, take up a battered training sword from the rack, and face Robert across the grass. Ned, with a resigned shake of his head, accepts the role of referee. Begin, Galon, Robert says, sword extended. My stats, I remind myself. Strength 8.76, agility 8.9, spirit 15.3. He has me badly on raw strength. At best I am even with him on agility, and I am ahead on spirit. There is a fight here. Robert presses forward immediately, his swing fast and overbearing, the wooden sword whistling from my chest. I plant my feet and parry cleanly, but the impact sends a tremor up my arms. I do not push back, I take a half step back instead and brace for the second swing. The second crash is heavier than the first, dust and wood shavings flying off both training swords, my palms going faintly numb. I retreat further to buy time. Inside, I am marveling. Those 2 strikes already meet Sir Godwyn's adult knight strength, and Sir Godwyn is in his 30s at peak. Robert is 15, and he is plainly not even at full strength. Robert is equally surprised. At the Eyrie, his peers cannot withstand even half his force. Even Ned's hands tremble after a session, and yet a 10-year-old Galon is taking it without visible strain. He grins, intrigued, and tightens his grip with both hands, stepping in with steadier feet, and turns the dial up to 70%. The next series of strikes hammers down so heavily the air hums and I feel my hands going almost dead. The grass at my feet shivers from the impacts. My feet slide back half a step against my will, and a final fierce stroke chips a small chunk out of the meeting point of our swords. I retreat 2 paces, shake out my left hand and look up at him. According to the system, Robert's strength must already be 15 or higher. 15 years old and already at 15. In another 4 or 5 years, when he is 20, what kind of monster will he be? No wonder he was able to hammer Rhaegar to death at the Trident. Galon, sorry, I got carried away. Are you alright? Robert says, scratching his head. He really did mean to tease, not to brutalize, but the result has surprised him even more, because despite retreating I had not lost my form, and the moment a flaw appeared I cleanly opened distance to reset. Strength, footwork, combat intuition, experience. None of it should belong to a 10-year-old. I tell him I am fine, and to keep going at full strength, no holding back. Both Robert and Ned go a little pale, and Ned actually advises me against it, as my friend might break bones look poorly concealed. I smile and tell them not to worry. I know what I am doing, and then I push off the ground and charge. After 2 rounds of testing, I have a rough read on Robert. His raw strength is on another level, but sword fighting is not just brute force. Otherwise, why would technique exist? I drive a fast diagonal swing toward his shoulder. He is startled, raising the sword to parry, and just as the blades are about to meet, I twist mid-motion, footwork as light as a swallow's, and convert the overhead strike into an upward slash for his neck. His pupils contract, his heart rate spikes, his block flies up but his stance is broken, his footing unsteady, his body swaying. The corner of my mouth curls. I close in and wrap 2 quick strikes at his abdomen, each one ringing off his frantic parry. His eyes are wide. Is this really the swordsmanship of a 10-year-old? He could simply use his weight and shove me down, but that would be too obviously bullying, and his pride will not let him. He retreats 3 steps, exhales, leg muscles tensing like iron, and explodes forward with a downward smash carrying the full thunderbolt of his strength. The wooden sword tears through the air with a low hum, aims straight at the sword across my chest. A calculated choice, one that should blow my guard apart and let the residual force thump my chest, hurting but not breaking anything. The face-saving compromise of a stronger boy who does not actually want to maim a younger one. I see all of it. With Spirit 15.3, my reaction speed and dynamic vision are sharper than anyone's around me, and his strike unfolds in front of my eyes as if the world had slowed. I instantly weigh 3 options: sidestep, head-on parry, or close encounter, and choose the riskiest. I do not retreat. I accelerate forward into the wind of his blade. My height and build are far inferior to his. A head-on clash is a guaranteed loss, but strength and weakness are never absolute. Timing is the key, and Robert's mistake was holding back. By aiming for the chest instead of sealing my movement, he has left me a gap to slip through. My mind feels machine cool and my blood feels furnace hot in the same instant. As his sword starts to come down, I lean back almost 90 degrees, drop to my knees, and ride my own forward momentum into a slide across the grass. His sword sweeps over my head with a sharp whoosh, hitting nothing. The follow-through that was supposed to land on my chest finds empty air. His center of gravity ruins itself. He cannot pull back, he cannot dodge. I slide past him on my knees, bring my wooden sword across horizontally, and tap him on the left flank with a sharp, short declarative crack. Robert freezes. His tall frame stiffens like a statue, his sword still locked in the dead end of its missed swing. He looks down at the mark on his side, mouth slightly open, brain blank. Ned, on the sideline, has already let his referee stick slip out of his fingers and clatter onto his foot, and does not seem to feel it. He stares with a stoicism completely shattered, mouth agape, eyes round with how. Robert finally turns his head toward me, throat bobbing, and lets out a single dry gulp. I rise slowly, brush grass off my knees, give the wooden sword a flick, and tell him it looks like I won. Robert opens his mouth, starts to say something, stops, and finally manages a dry laugh. "Galon, you little brat, you are amazing." He stabs his wooden sword into the ground with a thud and looks at me with embarrassment and admiration tangled together, plainly thinking, what will this kid be at 15 if he is already this at 10? Ned steps over with a face of helpless disbelief. He knows Robert was at full strength at the end, and the slide back was a stroke even he could not have anticipated. On a real battlefield, it would have hit plate armor and done nothing. In a sparring match, it was decisive. If Robert lost, Ned thinks, what does that make my chances? I tell Robert it was just luck, and inwardly admit that without Oathkeeper I could not beat him in a real duel. But with Oathkeeper, even a real duel goes my way. Robert claps me hard enough that I wince. He will go back and train more, drink less, chase fewer girls. Otherwise, how will he show his face if he cannot beat his 10-year-old little brother? The defeat actually does him a kind of favor by waking him up. The shock and joy outweigh the embarrassment because I am the heir of Tarth, his future vassal, his solid little brother. With a little brother this fierce, what does he have to be unhappy about? Jaime Lannister is going to be insufferable in a few years, and when that happens, Robert can simply send Galon at him. Ned, you come too. Robert is already turning, full of relish for revenge by proxy. From the bout, he can read me clearly enough. My strength is just below Ned's. My speed and agility are no worse than Ned's. My technique is even, and my combat intuition exceeds Ned's. Overall, it looks like an even match. With an edge to me, he has lost face already. He is not letting Ned escape. Ned's lips twitch. At 14, he is supposed to win, and if he loses, his confidence is going to crack the same way Robert's just did. He really does not want to step up. But Robert's mischievous gaze and my calm look leave him no exit, so he sighs and pulls the wooden sword out of the dirt where Robert stuck it. The pressure on me drops the moment Ned faces me. He does not have Robert's natural and human strength. House Stark almost certainly has a wolf blood legendary bloodline of its own, but Ned has not awakened it. His physical talent is the average sort. In the tale of the original story, Ned received the very best tutoring at Winterfell and then again at the Vale under Jon Arryn, the most refined education the Seven Kingdoms could give. and yet his actual combat record was frankly mediocre. At the Tower of Joy, he led 7 northern warriors against 3 of the Kingsguard, and almost everyone on his side died. Without Howland Reed's improbably timed knife, all of them would have fallen, and Arthur Dayne was practically seeking death by then, having lost his will to fight after learning of Aerys and Rhaegar. Then later, ambushed by Jaime Lannister in King's Landing, Ned performed even worse, outnumbered when he was the larger party at the tower, but managing to be crippled in one leg and dragged into the Red Keep's dungeons. If I had to set a power ranking, Arthur Dayne and a young Barristan would be S-tier legendary swordsmen, and the Prime Robert, Prime Jaime, the Mountain and the Red Viper would be A+, and Brienne, the Hound, and Bronn would be standard A. Ned, honestly, barely an A-. So I am not nervous. The wooden swords meet with a sharp crack and the impact rolls back through my arm. From it I confirm my reading. Ned's strength is greater than mine, but only slightly. At strength 8.76 myself, his is at most around 9.1 or 9.2. Reasonable enough, his physical talent is average and he is only 14. Without long-term training and proper noble nutrition, he would have ended up nameless. Perhaps even tragically, given his temperament. Crack, crack, crack. Within a few breaths our swords have met 7 or 8 times. His expression keeps growing more solemn and mine keeps growing more composed. He feels he cannot break my defense. I seem to anticipate every line he chooses. Sparring with Robert was actually less exasperating, because Robert had brute force but loose footwork and obvious openings. Ned has agility close to mine, footwork that is not flexible enough to outmaneuver mine, swordsmanship without exploitable openings, and strength that is not weak. He cannot find the gap, and his every full-strength swing comes back from my hands without even a tremor. He starts to sweat. He suddenly understands what Robert was going through. Surely both Baratheon and Stark cannot fall to a 10-year-old in one afternoon. The loss of face would be unthinkable. After a few more frustrated probes, he decides on a gamble. The only edge he has is strength, so he amplifies it, pivoting his feet, spinning his body in a full 360-degree rotation, while moving forward, gripping the sword two-handed, and channeling waist and rotational force into a single overhead chop coming down with all his weight behind it. It is an exceptional flourish for a 14-year-old. Even I could not block it head-on without losing. The residual force would drive my own sword into my shoulder, but I have been waiting for him to crack. He is not easy for me to hit either. His style is too steady, unlike Robert's recklessness, and my reach and strength are both smaller. A head-on break-in is unlikely. So when he commits to the gamble, the opening I have been looking for finally arrives. My eyes narrow. As his body is still rotating into the strike, I am already shifting my weight from both feet onto the right foot alone. As the wooden sword chops down, I sidestep right with one nimble step, and his blade hits empty air. His balance comes apart, leaving a wide opening, and I swing my own wooden sword sideways into his left shoulder and back. Smack, wood on flesh. Ned freezes in body and face both. Before he can process the result, Robert's mocking laughter is already tearing across the godswood, openly delighted, and the relief in it pulls Ned out of his daze. Feeling the dull pain across the back of his upper arm, he looks at me with a grimace. Ned, you lost. Robert strides forward, laughing wide enough to nearly drop his teeth, slapping Ned's shoulder. The moment Robert lost, he was thinking how he would never live it down, how Ned would nail him to a column of shame, now that Ned has lost too. His fear evaporates. Both losing means neither can mock the other, and as long as the secret stays among the three of us, dignity is preserved. At worst, I will bribe Galon, Robert thinks. I am his big brother. He will surely give me that face. Robert's wild laughter is half schadenfreude and half pure relief. Ned, meanwhile, is burning under the laughter. We have both just lost to a 10-year-old. How do you have the nerve to laugh this loud? He resists rolling his eyes and turns to me. Galon, you won. I am no match for you. He says it sincerely. I shake my head and tell him it was luck and his last strike nearly grazed my shoulder, which is technically true, though I know that even if we tried again, the result would be the same. The danger was only superficial, calculated in advance. Ned shakes his head. He can read truth too. But his thoughts are no longer about this match. He is 14, I am 10, and I can already defeat him. By the time I reach his age, what speed and technique will I have? Could he at 18 possibly catch up? He thinks about it and knows the answer is no. Forget himself. Even Robert will be overwhelmed in a few years. At 10, I match Ned's strength, which means I have prodigious natural strength like Robert. On top of that, I have the technique Robert lacks. I will plainly become the next sword of the morning. Ned has no chance against me. He resigns himself with a private inward sigh. Back at the Eyrie, he, like Robert, was considered the best of his generation, and that confidence is now dented hard. He resolves to train harder when he goes back. Galon, do not be modest. We are so much older and you beat us, I cannot imagine what you will be in a few years, Robert says, slinging an arm around my neck. Ned nods seriously. The most terrifying part is that I have both the talent and the holy sword. Who could possibly beat that? I scratch my head, embarrassed. I have the merit to accept their compliments openly, but the Chinese core of my old life still wants me to be humble. Come, Robert. Ned, let me take you to the sea, I tell them. The glass sea of Tarth is the most beautiful coast on the eastern shore of Westeros. We climb down the rocky path from the Godswood, pass through grass and stone, and within a few minutes reach a private beach that belongs to House Tarth. It is only 5 minutes from Evenfall Hall, and the scenery is breathtaking. Water transparently azure, 2 cliffs curving out to sea like the wings of an eagle to shelter the bay, with only a small mouth open to the tide. Large rocks above and below the water, ancient trees casting deep shade, colorful fish darting through the rocks, and seagulls calling far off. There are no waves in this sheltered cove. The water is glass clear under the sun. When Brienne plays at the sea, she comes here, and when I want to rest from training, I come too. In my old life, the videos I saw of Sonya and Phuket in Hawaii never matched the calm of this little beach. Robert is exclaiming, "Wow, Tarth has a place like this. Why have you never brought me here?" I tell him we have only ever brought him in passing, and he laughs and starts pulling off his boots. Ned takes off his shoes more carefully and folds his shirt with neat fingers as he wades in, the shock of the clear, cool water rising past his ankles, calves, knees making his eyes brighten. The sea in the north freezes you to death, and the sea at Goldtown is murky and rough. Tarth's waters refresh the spirit instantly. I strip my shirt off and wade in. Robert leaps from a high rock with a cannonball splash. Ned comes in slowly, methodically. After a few minutes of floating, Robert grins and lunges at me with a huge 2-handed slap across the surface, and I take a face full of water. I retaliate, but his height and reach and broad palm let him outsplash me 3-1, and the spray fans out and catches Ned too. The reserved Ned wipes his eyes with annoyed fingers. The 3 of us pelt one another for a while. Eventually, I tire of being outsplashed and dive. My swimming is at 4% and counting, far above my peers and rivaling seasoned fishermen. I slip easily down to the seabed among coral and shells and reach out and catch a palm-sized lobster, then surface. Robert is still hammering Ned, and Ned, honest as ever, cannot keep up. With a mischievous smile, I laud the lobster across the water, and it hits the back of Robert's neck. Cold, hard, slick. Ow, he slaps at it on instinct, then sucks in air as the falling lobster pinches him. He shakes it off before it gets a proper grip. He spins around, sees me floating not far away with a grin on my face, and calls me a little rascal. Once we are spent, we lie back and float in the shade of the trees, comfortable and quiet. Robert, Ned, want some grilled fish for a snack, I ask. Catch fish, Robert asks. Shoot fish, I tell him. The water is shallow here and full of rockfish, and if you aim well, you can pick them off with a bow. Want to make it a contest? Robert is interested at once. My competitive streak is awake. He poured salt water into me. I want a clean reversal. The sun is sinking westward. By the beach, several campfires have been kindled. Robert, Ned, and I sit around one fire, and 4 or 5 guards tend the others farther off. We are roasting the sea fish we shot from the rocks earlier, with the smaller, less flavorful ones tossed straight into the flames and only the large ones skewered on branches. Our catch was generous. More than half of the fish belonged to me, a smaller portion to Ned, only 2 to Robert. Robert's swordsmanship is decent, but his archery is genuinely mediocre. Galon, why is your aim so good? He asks from across the fire. Drinking from a wine jug, he begged off a guard and watching me turn my fish over the embers. Talent, perhaps, I tell him, and this time I do not bother to play it down. My archery talent really is stronger than my swordsmanship. Without spending a single point, I have practiced naturally to 33%, and in a few more years it should hit 50. Even Sir Godwin marvels at the rate, and predicts I will win the archery championship at a tourney one day. To me, archery is mostly fun. Westerosi knights all wear plate armor anyway, and arrows kill foot soldiers more than they kill knights. The release of a string and the thud of a shaft into target is just deeply satisfying. Galon, you will absolutely be a tourney champion someday, Ned says quietly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. I laugh. It is still early. Inside, I know that with my growth curve, I will eventually stand above all Westeros, and a tourney crown will be only one small ornament along the way. By the way, Galon, you did not go to the tourney at Lannisport 2 years ago, but Ned and I both did, Robert says, taking another swig. That fellow Rhaegar is genuinely formidable. He talks about how Rhaegar carried himself in the lists, and the cold mood of the realm in the years since, and Ned chimes in with what he saw at the Eyrie when news of King's Landing reached them. From there, the conversation drifts onto the defiance of Duskendale, which still feels recent enough to chill the air. Lord Dennis Darklyn, defying a crown demand for new tax rights for his town, refused the king his place at table and effectively held him hostage when Aerys came in person to settle the matter. For half a year, Aerys lived in that captivity, and what came out the other side was no longer the same man. Barristan Selmy, on his own, infiltrated the keep, broke the king free, struck down Denys Darklyn, and earned the title Barristan the Bold for the rest of time. But the king who came home was already mad, paranoid, terrified of fire, and trusting nothing but it, a black ember burning where a man once was. Robert speaks bitterly of how Aerys's burnings have grown more frequent with the passing seasons, how nobles privately mutter the words Mad King from the wall to Dorne, how Rhaegar has been driven out of King's Landing to Dragonstone with Elia and the children, just to survive his own father's gaze. The conflict between father and son is now visible to anyone who cares to look, and undercurrents are surging through every kingdom in the realm. Listening to them, I keep a mild expression, but my mind is busy. The timeline is sliding precisely along the lines I remember. The defiance of Duskendale has happened. Aerys's madness has set. Rhaegar is in retreat, and Steffan Baratheon is alive but soon to be sent across the narrow sea on the doomed bride search that will kill him at Shipbreaker Bay. The War of the Usurper is no longer abstract. It is gathering. Robert and Ned cannot see it yet because they are inside it, but I can see the shape coming. I tell myself again that I have years. Years to climb attributes, years to fold in bloodlines, years to bring Brienne properly, years to marry Helena and bind House Hightower into our position. I tear off another piece of fish and chew slowly under the dimming sky. The next morning we sail for Storm's End in House Tarth's flagship, with Robert and Ned aboard as my escort, and Brienne at my elbow with her hair tied back in a neat ponytail. Before we left Evenfall Hall, I had Father stop by the workshop, because I want to bring something on this trip beyond the ordinary courtesies. I want to bring a product. In the preceding 2 years, alongside training and judging, I have used my old life knowledge to introduce 2 small inventions to House Tarth, the toothbrush and toothpaste. The toothbrush is straightforward, boar bristles bound to a polished bone or wooden handle. The toothpaste is mostly chalk powder, a measure of salt, a touch of dried mint and clove for flavor and freshness, and a binder to hold it. Crude by my old life standards, revolutionary by Westeros's. Westerosi nobles brush their teeth with rough cloth and wood ash and herbs. Commoners do not brush them at all. Within a season, our household had stopped losing teeth to rot, and within a year, travelers from Storm's End and Sapphire Town were buying boxes to take home. Father has been quietly patient with me on this front, indulging what he assumed was a strange hobby until the gold dragon started rolling in, and now he understands. This is why House Tarth's coffers have been filling. It is not just trade, it is a monopoly in a small but addictive product. And Father has begun talking to House Hightower in Old Town about distribution into the Reach. House Hightower's traders can move our toothbrushes and toothpaste through the Reach, the Westerlands and the northwestern edge of Dorne in volumes Tarth's own ships could never reach. With that alliance, the goods become a real fortune, and the marriage between House Tarth and House Hightower starts to make sense even before the political weight of the bond is counted. I have boxes of both products in the hold for Renly's name day. Gifts to the major houses Father has highlighted as worth wooing. House Baratheon, obviously, but also the Tyrell representative who will be there, and the Hightower party led by Lord Leighton himself. The voyage is short. Storm's End rises out of the cliffs ahead, like the rib of the world. The curved walls, smooth and seamless as Brandon the Builder's hand made them, and Brienne presses to the rail with shining eyes because Maester Armon has filled her with stories about it. Robert points things out for her. That postern, that battery of trebuchets, the line of seabirds that haunt the cliff. She nods over and over. We disembark and ride up to the great gates, and there is Duke Steffan Baratheon, alive and broad and laughing, his wife at his side, and a swaddled bundle in a nurse's arms. Renly only weeks old, with the dark Baratheon hair already showing on his small head. Father presents his gifts. I present my boxes. Steffan laughs and embraces all 3 of us at once. The hall is decked with banners, the trestle tables stacked with food, and the names sliding by my ear in introduction are like a roll call of half my old life memories. Lord Leighton Hightower with his daughter Helena and his younger daughter Lynesse. Mace Tyrell, young and slack-jawed at his mother's side. Jon Royce, Mathis Rowan, minor lords from the Stormlands by the dozen. I keep my courtesy smooth and my voice calm. I am 10 years old. I am supposed to be charming and graceful, not commanding, and that is a line I plan to walk well. Helena is the Hightower face that matters to me. She is 11, slender, with the pale Hightower hair and a calm, watchful gaze that does not do the false coquettishness of the other noble girls in the hall. Father has made it plain over the past months that he has been corresponding with Lord Leighton about a betrothal between her and me, formalized at 14, married between 16 and 18, exactly after the War of the Usurper ends, the timing impeccable. I have no objection. My old life's romantic ideas have nothing to say in a world where great houses make alliances by marriage. Father has picked me a Hightower lady who is rich and beautiful and well-mannered, and I would be a fool to reject her in the name of TV drama free love. I take Brienne over to greet her, and she greets Brienne with quiet warmth. I watch Helena's face for tells through the conversation. There is no haughty edge, no boredom, no false brightness, only an actual interest in plants and books, and a soft shyness whenever our eyes meet directly. The faint blush at her ears when I lean in to laugh at one of her remarks is worth more to me than any other measure, because as the saying went in my old world, a young girl's blush is worth more than anything else. Lynesse, her 7-year-old sister, latches onto me with the delight of a small, spoiled creature, refusing to let go of my hand for half the afternoon, and sobbing openly when our families part the next morning. Brienne thinks this is hilarious. I think Lynesse is going to grow up into trouble for someone, but she is undeniably pretty already, so it is hard to dislike her. That night, Father and Lord Leighton hold a long private discussion. By morning, the betrothal is settled in principle. At 14, there will be a formal engagement ceremony, and the marriage will follow at the right time. Lord Leighton is delighted to gain a son-in-law who has found a holy sword and is reputedly the strongest boy of his generation. Father is delighted to bind the second oldest house in Westeros into the rising fortunes of Tarth. The toothbrush and toothpaste deal is signed alongside it. House Hightower will distribute exclusively into the Reach and the Westerlands, with profit split. The two houses joined in trade and blood will be very difficult for anyone in Westeros to provoke. The next day we sail home. Tarth folds back into its usual rhythms. Helena is only 11. I am only 10. Neither of us is ready for anything beyond friendly correspondence. A good first impression is enough. Many things happen during these next 4 years. For the Stormlands, the largest event is the death of Duke Steffan Baratheon and his wife. A few months after Renly's name day, King Aerys, whether on a sudden whim, paranoia about his own son, or some other private design, decrees that Steffan Baratheon should sail to Essos and seek a bride for Rhaegar in the Free Cities, a girl with silver hair and purple eyes, and pure Valyrian blood. Steffan and Aerys had fought together in the War of the Ninepenny Kings as young men, and out of obligation or affection or some thread of real loyalty, Steffan agrees and sets out across the narrow sea with his wife Kissana Estermont. He does not find a Valyrian girl in any city. On the return voyage, just as Storm's End is in sight, his ship strikes the rocks of Shipbreaker Bay and every soul aboard drowns. The accidental death is a thunderbolt across the Stormlands. Robert, far away at the Eyrie when he hears, is furious and grief-stricken in equal measure, and curses Aerys aloud in front of Lord Arryn. Jon Arryn talks him down and brings him in person to Storm's End to be invested as Duke. Robert, suppressed by Jon Arryn's calm, does not openly act against the throne, but the hatred is buried deep and will never come out clean. In his eyes, Steffan and Kissana were as good as killed by Aerys, and that hatred will extend to Rhaegar later on, because Steffan and Kissana sailed under the pretext of finding Rhaegar a bride. Jon Arryn, seeing Robert young and hot-headed and dangerous, decides to bring him back to the Eyrie for further years of guidance, both to teach him to be a competent duke and to soothe the rage out of him. At the funeral I attend with Father and Brienne, I try to comfort Robert and find that comfort is useless. The bodies of Duke Steffan and Lady Kissana were recovered after a week of searching, by which time the corpses were bloated and decomposed beyond recognition. Robert almost breaks when he sees them. Such hatred does not forget. Later, when Rhaegar steals Lyanna Stark and cuckolds him, the busts will all be stacked. The murder of his parents and the theft of his wife. Imagining myself in Robert's place, I know I would never let House Targaryen go either. I would chop every earthworm in the Targaryens' fields in half, and shake every egg yolk until it scrambled. Spurred by my martial example and by the death of his parents, Robert at the Eyrie stops indulging himself and starts training with new ferocity, hoping to one day collect his revenge. In King's Landing, matters grow worse. Aerys' mind cracks further, his executions multiply, and from the Wall to Dorne both commoners and nobles begin privately calling him the Mad King. Rhaegar, under enormous pressure, has by now married Elia Martell of Dorne, and quietly retreated to Dragonstone with her to escape his father's paranoia. Aerys remains hostile. He refuses to embrace Rhaegar's children, refuses to attend the name days of his granddaughter Rhaenys and his grandson Aegon, and the rift between father and son is an open wound visible to the entire realm. As the royal conflict deepens and the king's madness spreads, undercurrents surge across all 7 kingdoms. Tarth, meanwhile, holds its peaceful separated stillness. The island stands apart from the mainland, and father keeps Brienne and me in seclusion as the world quietly gathers itself for war. I track the political weather, but only enough to know which way the plot is turning. My real energy goes into self-improvement. The toothbrush and toothpaste business has made Evenfall Hall steadily wealthier in these years, and father has become positively generous with my training. Through gold, he has cultivated relationships with high-ranking nobles in Tyrosh, Pentos, and Lyes, secretly purchasing serious criminals and death row prisoners for me to judge in Tarth's dungeon. From last year on, he has even reached into Slaver's Bay, Yunkai, Astapor, Marine, to buy more prisoners. He has poured these resources into me, and I have judged so many that I no longer remember the small sins, only the large ones. In the Godswood behind the castle, I am performing my daily training. Sir Godwyn does not spar with me anymore. Since last year, he declared me graduated, because in actual combat and in swordsmanship, I have simply surpassed him and there is nothing left for him to teach. So I train alone now, on my own architecture. Today I am shirtless, in black linen trousers belted with a narrow leather strap, doing push-ups with a millstone-sized log across my back. 318, 319. Sweat drips from my chin onto the grass. At 14, my body is approaching its full mature shape. I am almost 1.8 meters, with clean, clear muscle lines, not bulky but full of sculpted explosive power. To do over 300 push-ups carrying a log near 40 caddies is the kind of feat ordinary knights of the Stormlands cannot match. 350. Finally done. I roll the log off my back, sit on the grass and breathe. My features have fully matured over 4 years. My jet black hair is slightly curly and cut short, the strands damp at the tips, My eyes are deep clear blue with a faint circle of pale gray at the rims of the pupils. My nose is straight, my skin fair, my lips thin and rosy. Together with the muscle definition that women apparently cannot stop looking at, I have, in the words of my old life, the air of a young Keanu Reeves. I grab a towel, wipe my face, and pull up the panel. Galon Tarth. Title none. Strength 18.73. Agility 18.11. Spirit 19.14. Mana 0. Skills. Swordsmanship 62%. Archery 69%. Riding 48%. Common tongue 69%. Swimming 72%. Valyrian 6%. Bloodlines, Evenstar 9%, Targaryen 1%, Storm King 1%. Oathkeeper Gold, maxed, pet none. Judgment points 1. Strength has gained 0.01 since this morning. A small smile crosses my face. Looking at the panel after 4 years of relentless work, it is hard not to feel a little luxurious. My current physical statistics would crush every night on Tarth. A normal adult man's strength and agility are around 1.0. A well-trained knight's strength is between 1.3 and 1.5. Agility between 1.2 and 1.4. Mine in both is over 18. By the systems per 1. 0 framing, that means roughly 18 times the baseline. In sparring with Tarth's vassals and visiting hedge knights, only Sir Godwyn and 2 or 3 of the most skilled have ever pressed me hard, and those barely. Hedge knights average 10 to 30% in swordsmanship, well-trained knights 30 to 40, masters like Sir Godwyn 50 to 55, and I am at 62%, top tier even within the 7 kingdoms. Crucially, my spirit at 19.14 means my insight, my speed of thought, my adaptability, my neural reaction speed all sit nearly double a normal man's. And combined with high strength, agility, and technique, it produces a synergy where 1 plus 1 is greater than 2. I could now easily defeat Jaime Lannister, who is a year older than me. Even Robert, in a renewed match, I could win. In a fair spar, Barristan or Arthur Dayne would still beat me, but in a life and death duel with Oathkeeper drawn, I would win. The Holy Sword's edge collapses every armor advantage they have. My growth has even outpaced my own expectations, mostly thanks to Father. Without his network in Essos, I could not have judged so many. About 70 or 80 death row inmates from Tarth itself, and nearly 200 from Essos in 4 years. It took those numbers to push my base attributes near 2.0, not even counting the natural growth that has come with adolescence. My bloodline column shows another small surprise. Blood of the Evenstar has crept from 8 to 9% without me adding any points. Natural growth. So my innate Evenstar talent must be high. The blood of the Evenstar is the legendary Tarth bloodline, inherited from a forgotten ancestor, and I do not yet know its full effects, but my rapid physical development is plainly tied to it. I am 14 and nearly 1.8, and at 16 I should reach 1.9. The bloodline carries traits like great height and a strong constitution. The rest will reveal itself as the percentage climbs. I close the panel as a cheerful voice rings out from beyond the trees. Brother, Father and Maester Armand sent me to call you. I look up to see Brienne running toward me with a beaming smile. At 10, she is already nearly 1.65 meters tall and broad-shouldered. Her features are slightly neutral, lacking the soft sweetness of a typical girl's face, but she is far from ugly. I have made her keep her hair long and tied in a ponytail, so even when her face is plain, her shape never crosses into tomboy. Over the years, I have given great attention to her oral health and dental growth. So unlike the original, Brienne, her teeth have come in cleanly, not exceptionally white or perfectly straight, but well within normal. Her skin is not rough either. I have the maids and old nannies attend to her with the same skincare we make for the household. And despite the scorching sun and constant sea wind of Tarth, her cheeks remain delicate. She is naturally fair-skinned, her platinum blonde hair and brows catching the light, and her clear blue eyes give her smile a contagious quality. She no longer throws herself at me the way she once did when she was small. She is a young lady now, but she jogs over without losing breath, calling out that Maester Armand and Father are looking for me. Maester Armand in recent years has not had quite the energy he once did, and our schedules have differed. My study time with him is now 8 to 9:30 in the morning. Afterward, I follow Father to learn estate management, touring the towns of Tarth, learning how taxes and docks are run, how to handle weather disasters, how to mediate disputes between small folk. In the afternoon, I do my own training. In the evening, I choose between more training, more study, or rest, depending on my mood. Brienne's day is more regular. Study with Maester Armand in the morning, night training with Sir Godwyn in the afternoon. Father had originally hoped she would be raised as a lady, with needlework and flower arrangement. But Brienne's talent in those areas was even worse than Arya's in the original story. She wanted swords. She wanted to be a knight like her brother. Father resisted at first because he felt that was no path for a noble girl, but he could not hold out against her stubbornness combined with my advocacy. And after the near drowning that brought me into this world, he has been more flexible about what matters. As long as the children grow healthy. As long as I am already doing well, he reasons, he does not need to be strict with Brienne, and if she enjoys swordsmanship, she may practice for fun. Then, as she practiced, the reports back from Sir Godwyn began to surprise him. Brienne's talent, while less than mine, far exceeds that of a normal boy. Her future strength might surpass his own. Father heard this and went a little dazed, even slightly headache-stricken, because he started to fear she would never find a husband. By that point, of course, Brienne was already swinging a greatsword with formidable power, and there was no putting her back into needlework. With my protection added, Father gritted his teeth and accepted it. Sometimes, watching her natural gifts, he sighs and says, "It is a pity she was not born a boy, since a girl, no matter how strong, has trouble shining in a knighthood entirely controlled by men." I see it differently. With my help and guidance, Brienne's future achievements will surpass even her original story peak. What is wrong with being a woman? As long as she defeats every man who refuses to be convinced, Brienne will be the strongest female knight in Westeros. I tell her this often. She smiles every time as if her eyes are catching something far ahead. What do Father and Maester Armin want? I ask, pulling on a linen shirt and ruffling Brienne's hair. I do not know. They did not say, only they were both frowning, she answers. Frowning, both of them. That suggests something serious. We hurry back to Evenfall Hall. Father is sitting in the Great Hall waiting. After he dismisses Brienne, he tells me directly, the Lord of Reborn, Hoster Tully, has written to say that to celebrate the birth of his daughter he will hold a tourney at Harrenhal, and the knights and nobles of the Seven Kingdoms have been invited to attend. The tourney at Harrenhal. My eyes narrow at once. After the first jolt of recognition, excitement and nervousness rise together. After waiting so long, this day has arrived. The tourney at Harrenhal is one of the most significant gatherings in the world of Game of Thrones. The War of the Usurper, the fall of House Targaryen, and many later turnings begin from here. This tourney is not as simple as it appears. Father continues, and I ask why. Father tells me the grand tourney is most likely organized and bankrolled behind the scenes by Lord Tywin Lannister. That surprises me. I had not heard this theory before. Father shakes his head and asks if I know how much the prize money for winning is. How much? I ask, curious. 60,000 gold dragons, he says calmly. I open my eyes wider. Father, is that the total prize for the 3 events combined, or only the joust? Only the joust, he says. The melee champion gets 40,000 and the archery champion 20,000. I suck in a breath. 120,000 gold dragons in prize money alone, far above the tourney Robert will hold at King's Landing in the original story, to celebrate Ned becoming Hand. And that is just the prize money. Venue, hospitality, wine and food will all multiply the cost. House Tully cannot possibly afford this on its own. Whoever is funding it from behind has very deep pockets. In all the Seven Kingdoms, only a few houses can shoulder it. Why then, do you guess Tywin, I ask? Because this tourney will gather most of the nobles and knights of the realm, Father says, and I have corresponded with Lord Leighton, who tells me Tywin will use the tourney to discuss the deposition of Aerys and the installation of Rhaegar with many lords. So Father has gotten this from Lord Leighton. House Hightower's intelligence network is the broadest in Westeros, not as needle-fine as Varys's, but the widest, because the Citadel sits in Old Town and every maester, however sworn, leaks at least a little to his birthhouse. Father smiles. Taking sides is for the dukes. We only need to follow the liege we owe fealty to. I smile too. The bird that sticks its head out gets shot. We do not pick sides, we follow the crowd. But, I add, things will not be that simple. Why, Father asks. Father, this is a gathering for the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms, and they intend to use it to discuss deposition. What if the king himself comes to Harrenhal in person? Father immediately frowns and falls into thought. You mean the king will sense Tywin's intent, he says. I nod. Father, what the king fears most right now is precisely Tywin. He may have been deceived in the past, but he has Varys with him now, and Varys's little birds are not to be underestimated. Once the king knows, he will surely act. You make a point, Father says and nods. Looking at the past few years, although Aerys is mad, his methods have grown sharper, not duller. Those he burns are indeed his real enemies. Then Galon, perhaps it is better for us not to wade into the muddy waters of the tourney, Father says, changing his mind, fearing Aerys at Harrenhal in person. Aerys is unpredictable, he burns men on whims, and he does not want me anywhere near the Mad King's eye. I shake my head with a smile. Father, no need to worry. If the king is as unscrupulous at Harrenhal as he is in King's Landing, that plays directly into Tywin's hand. Father considers it and finds it makes sense. With the nobles of the realm gathered in one place, if the king dares to kill openly, he will provoke universal fury, and Tywin can simply consolidate the nobility, depose him, and crown Rhaegar. Also, Father, I add, with my current strength I am capable of protecting myself at Harrenhal. My stats are slightly inferior to Barristan and Arthur Dayne in a fair spar, but with Oathkeeper in hand even Barristan and Arthur Dayne can be killed. In a place as crowded and chaotic as Harrenhal, I can escape any threat. Father smiles and nods. So you want to go, he says. Yes, I tell him. I do not want to miss the tourney at Harrenhal. Father, Helena and I have not seen each other in a long time either. I can arrange to meet her there. Over the past few years, focused on cultivation, I have only visited Old Town with Father once, and I have not seen Helena since, only kept up by Raven letters. I want to see what 15-year-old Helena looks like in person. I am 14, she is 15. 2 years apart since our last meeting. Letters have only deepened my fondness for her. She has a calm temperament, she likes plants and unusual books, and because I am a transmigrator with broad knowledge of plants and curiosities, our correspondence has flowed easily. I really want to see her in the flesh. Besides, Harrenhal is going to feature one of the most famous scenes of the entire saga, the moment Rhaegar crowns Lyanna Stark Queen of Love and Beauty in front of Robert. I do not want to miss that show. All right, Father says, I will arrange for a few skilled hands to accompany you, but do not take Brienne. He knows my strength. Galon alone with loyal guards can escape danger, but Brienne added would skyrocket the risk. I think it over and nod. Brienne will be heartbroken, but there is no helping it. By the way, Galon, the snakevine flowers you had me buy from Norvos have arrived. Father suddenly says. They have arrived, I say, pleasantly surprised. The so-called snakevine flower has a famous name on Earth. Hops. The flower grows only in the hills of Norvos, vines climbing trees in frames like snakes. The flower is shaped like mulberry but with petals like snake scales, hence the local name. Helena had mentioned them to me in correspondence, after seeing them in a botanical encyclopedia in Old Town's library, and from her description I immediately recognized hops. I had Father send people to buy a quantity. Westeros has ales, ciders, meads, and wines, but it does not have proper beer. If the snakevine flowers really are hops, I can brew authentic beer, and the profits will be enormous. Galon, is there anything special about this flower? Father asks. I smile and tell him only that Helena suggested it might be excellent for brewing, and I want to test it. Already in my mind I am drawing the production line out. The secrecy required, the alliance with Old Bayford and Sapphire Town, the way House Tarth could one day raise a fleet to rival the Arbors on the back of beer alone. The tourney at Harrenhal will be one stage, the brewery will be another. House Tarth has reached the moment where every careful step compounds into something visible, and I intend to make it so. Thundersmoke is a fine name, I tell Father, and I cannot help reaching out to stroke the horse's forehead. The smoke-gray stallion senses my intent and pushes its head into my palm of its own accord, a gentle gesture from a beast that should be temperamental. I circle him twice, growing fonder with every step. The smoky gray hue is rare among horses, sophisticated and beautiful, and if I were back on Earth he would be the equivalent of a silver-gray supercar, sleek and unmistakable. Galon, from now on he is yours, Father says with a smile, handing the reins over. Try riding him. I swing up in one motion, the saddle already perfectly fitted, and the moment I am on his back I can feel the difference. Thundersmoke's shoulder height is noticeably greater than any horse I have ridden before, and from up here my field of view widens, my balance steadies and the powerful musculature beneath the saddle flexes with a ready contained energy. I tug the reins gently and he understands at once, breaking into a brisk trot that quickly becomes a canter. He adjusts the rhythm of his gait to me, softens the jostle, picks his lines through the grass as if he has read my intentions in advance. None of the horses in Evenfall Hall's stables has ever offered an experience like this. No wonder the Dothraki value their horses more than their wives. Women are plentiful. A treasure like this is exceedingly rare. When I rein him back to Father, I am still reluctant to dismount. Father, how many gold dragons did this horse cost? 20, Father says calmly, and I almost laugh in disbelief. An ordinary travel horse is a few dozen silver stags. A wartime horse is 1 or 2 gold dragons. A trained high-quality warhorse is 5 to 10. Even a noble's mount rarely climbs above 10 gold dragons. Thundersmoke at 20 is outrageous, the kind of price ordinary nobles will not pay no matter how deep their coffers. Yet thinking it through, 20 is fair. He is top tier. He comes from the Dothraki who almost never sell their best horses, and the shipping alone from the Dothraki Sea to Tarth crosses more than 1,000 miles of sea. Father waves me down. There are still 2 days before we leave for Harrenhal. Plenty of time to bond with Thundersmoke later, and there is something else for me. I dismount. 2 young attendants Father brought with him step forward bearing a large wooden tray. I had been so taken with the horse, I never noticed them. I lift the black covering cloth, and a set of deep gray plate armor with a metallic sheen comes into view. The metal carries faint flowing patterns like ripples on water, the surface catching the light with a low, understated nobility. The helmet design is simple and practical, no flourishes. Only a slight raised arc at the brow for protection without sacrificing balance. The whole shape sturdy yet elegant. I lift my eyes to Father, surprised. Father, what is this forged from? Father smiles. Valyrian steel, surely you recognize it. I am stunned. Almost protesting, this cannot be real Valyrian. No, Father shakes his head, not real Valyrian. He explains that the free cities, having seen Valyria's glory, have long pursued the goal of recreating Valyrian steel, and a master smith of Qarth, in his attempts, produced this metal. Not as light or as strong as true Valyrian, but far better than common fine steel and resistant to rust. As I run my fingers over the rippling pattern, I realize where I have seen it before. This is essentially Damascus steel. In my old life, my classmates were always dragging me to forging contests after school. I know these patterns by heart, and I know Damascus's signature trait of rust resistance. Father holds up 2 fingers again. 20 gold dragons, surprisingly affordable for such craftsmanship. Father smiles wider. It was practically a gift. The toothbrushes and toothpaste have grown popular among the Carthian nobility, and to lock in long-term trade they all but pressed this armor on us. A gift that still costs 20 gold dragons. My mouth twitches. The margins on hygiene products in Westeros and Essos are extraordinary. Standing there, looking at the patterns, an idea takes hold. Could I replicate Damascus steel myself? I know nothing about smithing, but I have watched plenty of Damascus steel forging videos in my old life, and with guidance a skilled smith might stumble onto the technique. Tarth even has its own iron mine. If House Tarth could produce Damascus weaponry, the strategic gain would be immense. Time is too tight before the tourney. I will start the experiment after I return. The two attendants help me into the undermail, and then layer on the plate. Breastplate, pauldrons, vambraces, falds, helm, and finally fasten a gray-blue cloak across my shoulders. The fit is perfect. With my height now near 6 feet, the armor sits cleanly on me and the cloak lifts the silhouette by another order of magnitude. Combined with the cold authority I have built up from years of executions, I become something the two attendants cannot quite look at without holding their breath. Galon of Mourn Reborn, that is the impression I see crossing their faces. Father stands looking at me with a quiet flush of feeling, plainly thinking that without intending to, I have grown into a man, and that among the younger generation of the Seven Kingdoms, I have become the standout, in ability, in intellect, in appearance, in bearing. House Hightower is getting a slight bargain. The thought briefly crosses his face before he dismisses it. Helena is excellent in her own right. I move around in the armor, finding it comfortable, and regret only that Oathkeeper is not on me at the moment. Because with Thundersmoke beneath me and Oathkeeper at my hip, and this rippling deep gray plate, I would have the unmistakable air of a field boss waiting at the edge of a hunting wood. You two, from now on you serve Galon as his attendants, Father announces, and the two of them bow deeply, faces shining with the honor. Personal attendant to a noble heir is a real path of social climb. Donning armor is a complicated business, and a knight always has at least one squire. At 14 I am still too young to be properly knighted, and so I am being given 2 squires in training, drawn by father from clean modest families with sharp wits. The thin freckled brown-haired one looks oddly familiar to me. Father reminds me that is old Feck's son, the boy who first pointed me toward where Oathkeeper lay 6 years ago. The boy bows and says proudly, "Yes, young master. I am called Peak now. Such a simple name. Until recently he had not even had one." I nod at him with a warm smile. If he is loyal and clever, I will not begrudge him a future. I turn to the other, the chestnut-haired one with regular features and a steady frame. "What is your name?" "Harrison, young master," he answers, the formality smooth but a faint fervor in his eyes. "Is your father a hunter?" I ask, and both father and Harrison startle. "Yes, young master. How did you know?" I tell him I was guessing, but in truth my spirit at 19 is enough to read the perpetual readiness in his bones and muscle, the way only men who have lived in the wild long enough to be hunted by predators carry their bodies. After a few words I have the armor removed, send father back to the castle and stay in the Godswood with Thundersmoke alone. I do not let the gifts make me lose myself. Today's training is not yet done. I am not skipping it for the joy of a horse and an armor. One day off seems harmless, but the day you slack off is the day the discipline starts unwinding, and the thread of every habit I built across my old life and these 6 years here in Westeros runs through this single rule. Make plans in advance, complete them without wavering. That is how a poor boy in my old life claimed a key university place against his circumstances, and that is how a transmigrator earns a kingdom in this one. I do not refuse pleasure, but I never let pleasure claim me. So I finish my full training set, wipe down, feed Thundersmoke from a handful of grass, and only then do I mount him and ride out to the beach of Sapphire Bay to gallop. Riding a horse on a beach is a particular pleasure. Flat sand under the hooves to cushion the shock, the sea breeze in your face, the orange tide rolling beside you. I let Thundersmoke open up to full speed and finally understand why he is named Thunder. At full gallop he is fast as a thunderbolt, and his hooves on the sand thrum like rolling thunder, and his coat and mane stream behind him like running smoke. I take Brienne up afterwards for a slow ride and bring them both back, and over the next 2 days I spend nearly all my non-training hours getting Thundersmoke familiar with me. The legendary pet line on my panel does not light up, which means he does not meet the system's threshold for a legendary creature. A small regret. A direwolf might count, and dragons certainly do. But Thundersmoke is at the upper edge of merely mortal. If only the system would let me invest points in him. Useful as he is, he cannot be made more than what he already is. By the 5th day, I bring father to a separate tower in the Evenfall Hall complex that has been cleared out by Steward Claude's people and given to Old Bayfor as a brewery. "Galon, can you really brew wine in such a short time?" father asks, dragged here by his son, and visibly skeptical. I do not bother answering with words. I have Old Bayfor bring out the wooden cask of beer that has been resting in the cool chamber, and Old Bayfor's expression is no longer dubious. Over the past days he has been smelling the air hole of the cask, and the aroma has been steadily strengthening, the cloying sweetness and miscellaneous off flavors of ale absent. The malt aroma, rich and pure with a faint floral and bitter undercurrent he has never produced before. He has been quietly anticipating the unveiling. I lean over and inhale through the air hole, and the rich malt aroma fills my nose. Far stronger than anything I remember from industrial beer in my old life. The malt-to-water ratio here is 1:3. All handmade, no shortcuts. The aroma is authentic, and the fermentation has gone right. Ideally, we would let it sit another week, but I leave for Harrenhal tomorrow, so we open it now. I pry the lid off. The malt aroma rolls out into the room. Father and Steward Claude both blink in surprise. Not only has the brew worked, the smell is striking. They are familiar with ale, but ale carries that cloying sweetness and cloudy harshness that masks the malt. This barrel is clean, even fresh, almost refreshing. Inside the cask is a clear pale golden liquid with a soft white foam at the rim and a thin sediment at the bottom. In clarity alone, it is already a higher class than any ale they have ever seen. Old Bafer hands me a ladle and I scoop a small sip. It tastes wonderful, richer than the draft beers of my old life, with a stronger floral and herbaceous note from the hops. Only the carbonation is missing, because I do not yet have any way to introduce carbon dioxide. But that does not matter. This already surpasses any ale on Westeros. In flavor, it can no longer be called ale. This is beer. Old Bafer is rubbing his hands behind me, dying to taste it. He hands a second ladle to Father, who lifts it and takes a sip, and his eyes go round. The malt and the wine and the floral notes bloom on his palate, and the aftertaste of sweetness and malt rises from his stomach back through his throat. He swallows and stares. Even Father, who has tasted many fine wines, has to admit this has a unique flavor. He looks at me, his heartbeat audibly stepping up, suddenly understanding why I dragged him over. Old Bafer finally cannot wait any longer, and Steward Claude waves him on. He scoops, inhales, sips, closes his eyes, and gives a slow, appreciative shake of his head. "Young Master Galon, you are truly remarkable," he says. "I never imagined ale could be brewed to such a flavor. I have wasted my whole life on ordinary brewing."